To our January board meeting, and thank you for coming. We did start at 6 o'clock tonight and deal with some personnel issues, and so the meeting has already been called to order, and we are just back in open part of our meeting. The first thing I would like to do is approve our minutes from, actually we have 3 different meetings. We had our regular board meeting in December, and we had 2 special board meetings also in December, and one in December, one in January, and I need approval for all of those
I
meetings.
move we approve all 3. I saw nothing out of line for any of them.
Thank you.
Second.
Second by Jack. Any discussion on those minutes?
I just had one correction. The board meeting as to the Heritage meeting said it was adjourned unanimously 7-0. I know that wasn't true because I was outside on a phone call when you did it.
Oh, oops.
So, other than that, it was good.
That would be on me.
Thank you for that correction. Any other concerns on those minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I need approval of the agenda and any changes?
The only agenda adjustment we may have, as Mark offers, is to be here tonight to talk about our enrollment and growth projections. He is in another meeting in another community tonight, and he's been texting me that he's probably going to be pushing 8 o'clock or after. So we'll see when he arrives is when that report comes. If for any reason he gets pushed too late, we can see if we can reschedule him for one of our subsequent meetings coming up in the next few weeks.
So approval of the agenda?
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Tonight we will start with some reports. We have a student report from Anna. Doing solo tonight without Sean.
John, public comments.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I just hold your report a minute? I forgot about public comments. I just skipped over those. Each night, each board meeting, we do allow the public to come forward and make any comments on the agenda items for that night. And so if anybody in the audience would like to make comments, you may now. I welcome those. Just know that that opportunity is always available, and thank you. Now, Anna, let's hear about the students in our district.
Alright, so I unfortunately couldn't, I didn't have hands on a printer today, so I couldn't print out the agenda. But it's just pretty brief because the school is pretty busy, or the students are busy right now with finals, obviously, coming up next week, and there are also a few this week too. And besides that, the student council is hosting JDRF January, which I'm sure you've heard about former years. And it's Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, and we're hosting 3 games next week. The boys basketball game is going to be on the 21st. The girls basketball game is on the 23rd, and the boys hockey game will be on the 25th. And all of these games will be hosting raffles that local businesses have donated their goods to promote their business. And it also just the profits from the raffles will go towards the JDRF Foundation, which is awesome. And also, Pay It Forward this week is working on donations for Australia through a bake sale. I believe it's this Wednesday, which is great that they're doing that, and they're baking cookies for it, and many people are volunteering to donate their time for it. And then also, the Eco Club, this is just a beginner thing. If you don't know what ECO is, it stands for environmentally compassionate organization. So I'm a part of this club, but we're just trying to currently work on solutions to making our school a better and cleaner environment for the students. And it's just we're taking our first few steps. There's no progress yet. And just in addition to the finals, of course, this week and next week, there has been a new schedule put forth, so people don't have to cram and fit all their finals in like 1 or 2 days, because that's what some students have done in the past. And this one is like you have to have at least one final, like 2 finals every day. That's how it's fit. Like, see, like I have a final every day, Tuesday through Friday, and it works out perfectly, so it should be less stressful. That's pretty much everything that I see going on in the school recently.
That's a good idea, 2 a day.
Yeah.
How do the students like that?
Well, at first they were kind of confused and unsure about everything, but now they are less stressed and
Good,
they're good with it.
good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Question for you, on your
Yes.
basketball games,
Right.
you choose the Hughes Foundation. How do you, it seems like every year you do that same foundation. Is there a process to?
For JDRF?
Yeah.
Yeah, student council has been doing this for,
Forever?
For forever, yeah. And one of a former student's parent who, their kid has type 1 diabetes, really participates in it, and like parents can volunteer their time for JDRF. And student council has just like really wanted to help with JDRF, and we've just been doing this for a long time, and just the people in student council just go around to businesses and just do as much as they can to help out. Does that
But
make
there's
sense?
autism, there's,
Yeah.
You're just asking, how did they choose the Juvenile Diabetes
JDRF.
Foundation as opposed to rotating through other ones
Yeah,
every year?
It seems like
Yeah.
there's other, I just was wondering if you gave thought to that or any discussion
Yeah.
around that.
I'll have to talk to our president about that, but
Good, good.
that's a good thought. Yeah, I'll put some input in. Yeah, we've definitely been working more towards new goals this year and in the following years. So hopefully that will be one of them. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you coming. Next up are our teacher reports, Kyle and Ashton.
First of all, we would like to thank the Budget Committee as well as the board for considering the staff pay increase cycle. According to our survey that we conducted last year to all teaching staff, the majority of teachers would prefer to sign their contracts knowing what their upcoming salary would be. So we appreciate the fact that that is being considered.
Not much else from us, just a few other minor items. We've had a great start to some of our committee work. I know we started that new committee this year to look at the salary and compensation schedule. Those who were involved in the process have felt that we've had some very productive meetings going forward. And I know last week some of us were also involved in an HR meeting to look at the handbook and pull out some of the compensation items as well. And that was also met as a very productive meeting, a full day meeting where we seemingly got a lot done and some good steps headed forward. Other minor things from the WCA, our goal this year, as we shared with you at the beginning of the year, one of them is to push forward professional development inside of our organization. And we really are excited that we're getting to do that now. I know we applied for a 90-minute block during our February 28th Staff Development Day to do some work. And then also we have an opportunity coming up, a book study for not just our members, but anyone who's interested. And I believe the title of the book is Green Card Voices of Youth, right? So it's students from Madison, Waunakee, and their stories that we might be looking into, and I think that will connect really well to your goal of equity and looking into that across the district. So those would be, I think, our main points for tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And at this point, I would like to invite any board members to share anything that they have been involved in that they'd like to bring back to the board, or events they attended. Yes.
I got to attend the concert given by one of our former Waunakee High School grads, Jacob Kaltenberg's concert at the Waunakee High School Performing Arts Center was absolutely fabulous. It was really nice how we wove in stories of his journey between the songs, and it was just a great evening, and it's really nice to see where our students go from here, which is a lot of different places.
Any other events that you'd like to share? Thank you. The next item is to talk about the 2020 WASB resolutions. Julie will be our rep this year at convention. And if you have something that you'd like to share with her right now, we could do that, or I'm sure she'd be willing to take any notes from you between now and next week when you're at the convention. So I don't know if you had much time to go through the resolutions and if you'd want to share right now with Julie. If not, know that that delegation meeting is Wednesday of the convention week, and she will sit there and represent us well.
And I will also go ahead and share that my default position tends to favor local control. So even though I may agree with some of these initiatives, whether they should be elevated to state law, I think we should save changes to state law for really big things. So I'm just sharing my personal philosophy, and absent any other specific input from you all, I am likely to defer toward local control.
I concur.
I concur. All right. Look forward to that. Thank you. Spring election update. I think we have some candidates possibly in the audience. I am running again for the Westport seat as well as Joel Lewis. Thank you for attending. And for the Waunakee seat, we have one person running, Brian Hooper. Also, I think Rebecca needs us all to sign the paper in your file on.
Yes, the exemption from filing campaign finance reports, that's required by every board member, whether you're running for spring election, not running for spring election, or not running again. This covers your January through April, Julie.
Okay, geez.
Just one more somewhere around, Julie.
So if you could do that tonight before you leave and get that to Rebecca, that would be great. I'd also like to just spend a couple of minutes to talk about the timeline on the board and the superintendent evaluation process. I believe you got your code in November already, December and November. Yes, thank you.
That was
And
for the WASB.
for the WASB, just for our board self-evaluation. Last year, I think we asked for those to be done in February, although I know we don't deal with them until March. I'm sure March is pretty okay. Anybody have any thoughts when you want to submit that?
I appreciated having it broken apart into pieces, and so if you make this easy part that we already have the piece of paper that we need to follow up with, be due in February, I think that has value.
The handwritten or the open-ended?
This logged in thing, if you make this due by the February meeting,
Okay,
then the other piece,
and then
which
the
is,
open-ended one
it
for
breaks
the
it down.
March meeting?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? Everybody okay trying to get the login part by February? And then I guess I would like to visit in more detail about the superintendent evaluation. Personally, I would like to kind of make that a year-long process instead of having that come due in spring. Maybe we could pull together a goals committee and talk about that and make some recommendations. But I'd like to do that after next week's convention. Maybe we can get some input at that convention.
Why wouldn't that be in the HR committee? Talk about that.
Instead of the goals committee,
Right.
I guess it could go either.
You've generally done the evaluations as part of goals, though. with HR is more about.
Yeah.
I think because of the link between the goals and performance, the goals committee has worked with the superintendent to establish board and superintendent goals.
I would just like to look at the whole timeline of when these evaluations are looked at and the priorities that we set. You know, we didn't really get our priorities set until November, and to start evaluating them already in March, just how much can you do in that length of time? I would personally like to set them in July and review them in July. Like make it more of a calendar year. That's my thought.
So just being devil's advocate, because part of the rationale for doing it when we did it is so people coming off the board potentially could still have the input. So, not saying I have to be part of it, just saying
I
if you
think
wait
the-
until July, you risk 2 brand new members as opposed to,
I get that.
that's the trade-off.
I know. I do think that the board evaluation should be done with current people, but the district priorities, I don't know.
I think that's a good thing, whether it's HR or goals committee, because really, in my time on the board, we've approached it multiple different ways. I think the calendar has kind of been close to, but stretched one way or another. And so, but I think it would be helpful to get it nailed down to a specific protocol. And then we can, I mean, the board policy also stipulates a calendar, which really it pragmatically doesn't work with how this has worked.
Right.
And so it also talks about, gets to the point we would need a new policy, then a revision of the policy. And so I think it's something that I would, whether it's HR or goals, I don't care which, but I think it needs to be.
I do feel we currently don't abide by our policy.
Maybe both committees, the whole committee.
Well, I think what you do is you sit down and you look at the policy and talk about having specific agenda items laid out over the year and just plug those in what the policy says we should do.
So keep our current policy and,
Yeah. Evaluate it,
yeah.
evaluate it, but, look at, what our current policy is, when these things are supposed to be done per our policy, and then if it doesn't work, then you can sit down and change the policy.
Maybe we
But-
need to bring those policies out and look at that
Yeah.
before we start changing them. Maybe we might have time at next board development to pull out those policies and look at it. It isn't anything that we need to decide tonight. But I'd like to pull out our current policy and look at it first.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, okay.
But lay it out.
So by February, we'll have our login self-evaluation done, and we'll discuss the rest next month. Okay, committee report, starting.
Excuse me, before you go forward, so have we received the code? Because I don't recall seeing it.
And it looks like this.
Did it come in the
We
mail?
did get it.
No, I gave it to
Rebecca
you.
handed it out at one of our meetings.
Yeah,
I think it was already in our November meeting.
I think
It
so
was
too.
very early.
If you don't have it, send me an email and I will get you a copy.
Should look at our good pile.
I figured.
See, you would too.
So efficient.
Probably done.
And what's it called again?
School perceptions, it comes out from WASB through school perceptions, board self-eval.
And you have copies that you can send through email.
I think I saw that. Oh, it's supposed to be that.
You're on a learning curve, Judy.
Okay.
Okay, committee report, starting with policy. What have you guys been up to?
That's you.
I'm sorry. Hold it up.
we reviewed the first line, the first part of the 100 series, and we're going to move those to the board. We're going to set a policy meeting when we get to that part of the meeting this evening, where we'll review with that committee the second part of the 100 series, and then that whole series will come to the board for consideration. So they started the review of the policy review as. That's really what our last meeting was just trying to get a process down as far as how this is going to work, given the plethora of policies that are being recommended, some of which we're keeping, some of which are being amended, and some of which we're replacing with recommendations from the School Board Association.
It's pretty much there any action items to
There's no action items for this or.
And my computer just blanked out, so
Alright.
give me a minute.
Yes, it's curriculum. There's no action items there either.
Okay, curriculum committee. And,
I don't think there's any action on it either.
No action items.
No action, but it was a nice update for the Human Growth and Development Committee and their work. Brenda Murray was there to update us on what they've been working on. That was a good report.
Yeah, there was also, I think, a very, for me, valuable kind of interview information that came from our students about online courses.
Oh,
I
And
thought that was
technology.
hugely important as we kind of move our textbook discussions forward. So that was great. Anything else on the curriculum committee?
I'd like to just ask a question, and maybe something that should be added in facilities is that I've been hearing multiple times about our wireless coverage is not great. And if there are areas where we're trying to do this and that doesn't exist, as we're looking at dealing with maintenance referendums and stuff, it seems like that's something that should be fairly high priority.
And that they've been working to improve some of the areas that have created dead spots, but we can bring that to a facilities. The next facilities committees are going to deal with looking at a facility maintenance plan, so we can bring an update to there with regards to that.
When we move towards these digital, this digital material, are we saving any money from textbooks, or are we still buying textbooks to support?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, I think Tim can speak a little bit more directly to that question. Question, Tim, was with regards to kind of the financial outlay when we move from traditional textbooks to some of the online things, and how those different agreements and contracts work.
And, the short answer is it depends on a case-by-case basis. Digital doesn't necessarily save money if it's through a traditional publisher. It usually doesn't cost more, but what it will do is it'll lock you in on a set term. Whereas if you buy a paper textbook, as long as the textbook lasts, you can potentially extend that investment. Where we sometimes see higher costs is when we do a subscription and we supplement that either partly or entirely with paper materials, a so-called hybrid purchase, because then you're doing both. Now, where we have teachers go to digital materials and it's not a purchased or subscription from a publisher, sometimes there are cost savings because they may piece together open source components. So it varies, but I would say overall we haven't seen the kinds of cost savings that we might have been hoping to see with digital materials maybe a decade ago when this was just beginning to come on. And I think as Joe mentioned, and Julie and Judy were there, our students see pros and cons with the digital materials, and there are definitely some disadvantages that they see to the digital materials. They also see a lot of advantages too, but just in terms of a use case, it doesn't give you, it's not the overwhelming advantage again that I think we might have thought a decade ago.
What are some of the disadvantages that students are seeing with digital?
So there are a few. I think one is if you're reading, you're screen dependent. So if you think about when you read any lengthy text on, a smaller screen or even a larger screen like an Apple versus what you could do with a typical text, I think most of us would find we are more efficient with a paper text, and we may be prone to more skimming and shorter blocks of text digitally. Now, of course, if I'm looking for that particular thing to study on, you have word searches digitally that you don't have with a traditional textbook.
Can I just add, they really, I felt, talked a lot about the complexity of just logging on, shifting from tab source to a different place in the book, and just how slow it was, and it slowed down their whole homework process more than, to the point where they really, and they were really talking about a math series. They felt that they would be more efficient with just a math book. It was just cumbersome. The login for all of the different textbooks, if they have 2 courses that are online, the logins are very different, and they have to remember those, and it's different passwords, and it just wasn't seamless and easy for the students to navigate.
Yeah, and even with stuff like the online tutorials that you could get, it took you a while to figure out how to get to those tutorials. From the literature standpoint, or a more traditional reading text too, it was noted that, which is what I found as well, it's harder to flip back. It's harder to try to go back and, like, who was that character? How did that connect? Or it's not as easy to go back and look through and search. So
Yeah. I was really surprised that they weren't more
enthusiastic
and in favor than what they discussed.
Yeah, I'd say kind of the high level is that students like the technology for their work products, but they are much less favorable towards the digital-based instructional materials that we typically think of replacing textbooks, the different logins. If you think about it, you open a book, there's no spinning wheel while you're waiting for the book to load. The book is there. And you open a book, you don't have to remember, this book is padlocked. What's my password to get into this book versus this other book on my shelf? And if you think about what we do digitally with resources for kids, it's kind of like if we had every textbook padlocked, and we're getting towards a single sign-on, but we're not close to the single sign-on yet. So, and then, Dave mentioned the wireless piece, and so depending on if you're someplace with not the strongest connection, again, you're going to have delay in having that screen or resource come up.
It was, to me, a very eye-opening discussion from actual students. I appreciate you bringing that in.
So, just to clarify, these are students who, at some point in the past, learned how to study on the old-fashioned textbooks, correct? And now they've transitioned.
These were both seniors, so they've transitioned. Yes.
Okay. So they have a learning curve in terms of their transitioning too. These aren't kids who literally grew up on the Chromebooks, correct?
That's true.
but also a means of comparison.
Right.
But we've been in digital for a long time, even though we didn't have Chromebooks. So they.
And the one student is in physics, and physics has been digital.
At
But
least
I
in
guess
part
you're still
for-
looking at the user, not actually the material. Yeah. It just was interesting. I mean, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, digital versus books, but I think as we evaluate the cost and everything, this perspective was great.
Tim, do we survey students in other levels, like at the end of 6th grade and of 8th grade, because they also have an involvement and may have a different perspective?
So we have not done a student survey specific on technology in a few years. I'd have to check back with her, but I would say It's been a while, and certainly not specifically on the materials, and that may be something, I mean, the two students we brought in because they were student leaders, they were seniors. I knew they would be very open and candid with the board and with the committee, which I thought was going to be important. But it was two students. Now, I think their opinions are very representative. I've heard them in other settings, but yeah, I think there'd be some value in doing it.
I asked because the one I'm most familiar with was when we shifted to the new math program 5 through 8. And it was very interactive online with tutorials and even the take-home, options and that sort of thing. And so the enthusiasm was strong when, even in the classes when I saw it being used.
It would be interesting to talk to some of those students, and I'm sure there's, outgoing 7th, 8th grade student that would come and talk to us.
Yeah.
It's great just to hear that feedback, because you can, you brought some teachers in last year and we heard the feedback from the teachers, but this was, to me, totally different. Totally different information.
It's a good reminder why we want to have lots of interaction with our kids.
Yep. Any other questions for Tim on this? Thank you. Next committee is Budget Committee.
Okay, and I'm not going to go through every item on from our meeting, but there are two significant ones that Steve wanted me to bring to the table for discussion. I'm not certain we were looking for any action on them tonight, but the first one actually was referenced in our earlier session, listening to our teachers reps, and it's not just the teaching staff, but all staff are really very much interested in getting the salary portion of the budget determined in the spring versus in the fall, when we get our final numbers from the state and that sort of thing. I think there's a concern, particularly for equity in budgeting, that there's a perception sometimes that the salary is all it's what's left over versus maybe necessarily what maybe they deserve or what we're capable of providing. And so the discussions, they asked us to bring it to the board to see what interest there would be, willingness for that. Steve wanted us to talk about that. There's some general ideas that what we could do to make that happen is put off certain budgetary decisions until the fall, until midsummer, whether that's hiring positions or material resources, so that there's a little bit more balance in the budgeting process. And looking really to try to reward, I think in some way, the current staff we have, perhaps in lieu of maybe potential hirings.
Can I add a couple comments to that, Mark? And the way you started off is exactly right. What we're looking for is just some feedback for the budget committee as they put together their budget calendar and bringing back options that can address how we're going to look at pay and compensation within the budget for this next year. The two issues Mark brought up are, one, the timing aspect being, one of them being WTA negotiations. If we do move in this direction, then we have to schedule that into our process. The second part that Mark also alluded to is it's really a flipping of our budget process as far as what we're considering and when we're making those considerations. So if you look at this past year, we had markers in there for compensation, and then from there we also had some additional other budget requests, positions, etc. And under this scenario, and then what happened this past year was then the final compensation was put together in October, November, and we approved it at the November board meeting. What is being recommended per the feedback from staff and through really Steve, Brian, and I taking a look at this is we, on a one-time basis, just really flipping our process where compensation was determined based on the levels that you assign early on in that process, so that those pieces could be decided as all of our staff are moving into the next fiscal year. And then any other budget requests would then be either approved with dollars that are available or pushed off until the fall when we knew exactly what our dollars would be. And then those pieces would either, like you said, if they were material pieces, could be handled in the fall, or they would actually create a cycle where now that would be the first thing that we would hire for the following year come that spring. So it's a little bit of a shift, but I think once you make the shift in year one, you just create a new process.
And another piece, I think, the historical perspective, I think one of the major movers in moving that whole process into the post-start of the school year was the uncertainty of the state budget for many, many years, that we had no idea what was coming from the legislature, and that seems to be stabilizing, at least in the current form of the state budget.
That's really what the budget committee is looking for some feedback on.
So
I
any
guess-
thoughts?
I guess my question would be, okay, one of the things that we were able to do in our current process is put more money into salary.
Right.
And it wasn't an afterthought. It was really, from the board's position, having enough, or having the maximum amount of dollars available at the time. So are we saying that we do this at the beginning of the school year and then we reevaluate it later?
I think what you're doing is you make the decision earlier on.
If we make the decision, then that's the decision.
That's the decision moving in. And then the dollars that, if there were additional dollars in the fall, that's part of what would then be looked at for some of the other budget requests. So let's say you had a literacy coach you wanted to hire, and that was a new position. That would be approved. You had the dollars in the fall. You wouldn't necessarily have it in the first iteration of this. It's going to wait till the following year. So you'll basically hire it in the spring and summer of that following year, but you just create a new process moving forward where your budget process, the piece that gets finalized in the fall, might be some of these other budget requests that then get encumbered moving forward. But you're able to move the salary pieces and those decisions to the front of the process, and it's exactly what you said. They're not then reevaluated moving into the process. They're made it at the front end. Everybody knows where they sit then moving into the next fiscal year. So that's kind of the shift. The other piece is when we look at just the logistics of 580 employees and all the back pay, and really what that truly does to our payroll and business office is pretty challenging.
And morale. I mean, actually, all of our staff essentially are working almost a half a semester, a half a year, not half a semester, a semester with last year's pay.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many other businesses defer payments for half a year. That's essentially what we're doing with our process.
I think there's multiple reasons. One is certainly what Mark is talking about is feedback from staff and kind of that, how that is articulated forward as far as a morale piece, a value piece. Second piece, I think, is just looking at kind of, I guess, why we shifted in the first place, which was really based off of some state budget pieces and some unknowns moving forward. And I think truly the third piece, and that's a piece I know Brian's worked really hard with his staff on, the back pay is brutal on our staff here, trying to get all of those pieces in and watching those folks work. I mean, they're working a month to get it in, and it's a significant load for those folks. So I think there's multiple reasons to want and an interest to look at it. Certainly there's some pieces that have to be worked out as far as the transition into a different cycle. But that's part of why we're looking for some feedback to see if the board is interested in seeing what that looks like, then we can bring that back to the budget committee and include that into our budget process and share that as we bring forward our budget calendar for the year.
We approve our budget in October.
Final budget is approved in October, November, correct?
So what you're proposing is that we put the increase in before the final budget is approved? So they get it before the final budget is approved?
Right now, we're putting new positions at that point, and we're hiring them before the budget's approved. So, right, our budget process starts, the fiscal year starts on July 1, But we don't have all of our pieces from the state till October. So we don't set the budget gets set when we set our levy at that special meeting at the end of October.
So
that's
we're
when
actually doing a lot of payouts as of July 1, even though the budget's not approved officially.
Absolutely. We're paying bills July 1st on money we're anticipating is there. So you're basically just flipping this piece of it, and you're going to have to then look conservatively, Jack, on what you do for your other outlays, and that's going to be a little bit of the. You're going to have to be more conservative in that first year to make sure that you have the dollars when you come the fall, and then you're going to be deferring then some of those hires till the next fiscal year as it moves forward.
Well, I think you're going to have to be conservative in everything.
Mm-hmm. And that's part of what we'll be looking at when we do our budget workshop in March, is starting to look at what are the dollars that would be available as we get the first snapshot of our projections, and then how do all those pieces fit together and what can we do. But I know part of what we're looking at is Brian's working with HR work groups and then the HR committee. Some of those pieces hopefully can be more predictive of where we are with some of our salary pieces, and then we can have some confidence as far as how we're moving some of that forward with our staff.
I like the idea in general, and I definitely like the idea of getting rid of the retroactive back pay. My fear is that we have often used the third come Friday, to use extra money to deal with points and other things like that. And if we are sitting there going into September saying we already set salaries, in a weird way, we might end up giving them less. Because we're going to say, we already did that, let's go look at all these other things, and priorities of hiring more literacy coaches or whatever it might be, might just be the only thing we look at that point. Instead of saying, oh, hold it, we could go back here and do this, which would also require you to almost reopen negotiations, wouldn't it?
Well,
No, because negotiations is only on the CPA. So, in effect, you'd be doing it without being in negotiations if you even did give them the extra effect that we've often done at times. Part of my other fear of this is we are presuming budget stability coming out of the state. That will not last. I can almost guarantee, we just saw it.
Yeah.
We had a divided government, and sometimes that provides stability, but this time what did it do? Nobody knew if the budget was going to pass. And you sat and you sat and you sat. And yes, this year we will have stability because they passed a 2-year budget. Next year we won't. Are we going to go back because we don't have the stability again? And then basically we create a new process and then throw it out the very next year because the legislature and the government acts exactly like the legislature and the government always acts. You have stability every other year. That's all you ever have.
But to my point, you can't have it both ways.
Right. I
understand. I totally agree that if we're going to be conservative because we don't know what that stability is going to be, they may get less.
That's what I'm concerned with.
And but teachers are coming back and saying this is what we want.
Yeah, it's not just teachers, though,
but
the whole staff.
The staff is coming back and saying this is what we want. They have to go in with open eyes.
so another piece that has been relatively stable and predictable over the last several years is the CPI. And the CPI has not been, we're not living under great inflation currently. So that is the piece that's most predictable. And we do have an indication of what those CPI numbers are in April. So we could at least consider, I think it is worth considering, moving the process forward, especially for that piece of it. Because to me, it's an indication that we do value current employees and their pay and salary over what comes next and new positions. I'm glad the teachers, that the process and the discussion is happening and it's worth consideration. it is complicated. I think we always budget conservatively, so I'm not super worried about that piece of it. And we do always have the opportunity with those two prongs. The one piece we could commit to is the CPI.
I think tonight is really wanted to gather some input to see, we'll get some additional data pieces as we move forward with the budget committee. And particularly as in the next month or so, we get a very early look at what some of the potential budget figures look like for the next fiscal year. So that this can weigh into that, but certainly the input that the committee was looking for was, what are your thoughts on shifting that process, modifying it partially, as Dave was saying, or just not having an interest in it. And I think that a piece that you're bringing up, Jack, should be considered as we kind of take a look at it. But I think that should then, to me, that would be a body of work and a further discussion at the budget committee.
So it sounds to me like there's open-mindedness to the concept.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Well, for my, just clarity, my concept would be, this is what the teacher's pay is going to be. CPI, this is what your package is going to be. Because if you're, one of the things you brought up was back pay. And if we break that apart, you're not going to solve your challenge of back pay. You're still going to overload the system. So we're either going to do it all, or in my mind, we either do it all, or we keep it the way it is.
Okay. That gives us some feedback.
Anyone else? Okay, and then the next area deals with the soccer stadium project funding. Bids have gone out to identify the cost of replacing the current soccer field with grass, or in addition, what would it cost to replace it with artificial turf? And we expect those bids back sometime in late February, I believe.
Yeah, we'll be having them at the March board meeting.
And so they'll be here for that. As a budget committee, we would like to get some response as to if the board is, as a whole, is in favor of embracing the concept of replacing the field, at least with grass, and then the other piece, with football, the booster group was expected to pay for the rest of it, but that has gone to bid. We were looking for a sense of where the board is standing at this point. Does the board see this as something we're somewhat in favor of at this point?
So looking to do something similar to what we did with the football lacrosse Warrior Stadium. Is the board interested in really looking at a contribution from the board being equal to the value of the grass field when
Right.
those bids come in? That's the question that the budget committee would like your feedback on, and then if the answer to that, for example, would be that you are in favor of looking at that, then the budget committee would be looking at ways that they could structure that from a payment
And we've
standpoint.
looked at several options that could cover the cost. We have estimated guesses what that might be, and we certainly have the resources where we can cover it if the board is willing to go that route. But it's a matter of, is the board interested in pursuing a similar path with the soccer group as we did with the football group?
The football group had money to cover the turf, right?
Right.
They had it through bids. So the piece that we've articulated to the soccer group, that this is part of where the whole conversation is coming in. It's a little bit different as far as the whole financing package, Jack, is when the football project came through and we got to really that March meeting, the equivalent of this one that's coming up. We also put the numbers together that football group did not have, and that group did not have all the dollars in cash. So we are still, that has been a piece that we're continuing to get through the foundation as those those contributions are brought forward on an annual basis. Steve gave a report to the committee that showed that we are ahead in those payments, so that is working positively. But the piece that we have looked at is that a model we want to do moving forward as far as really trying to bank things out of like a fund balance to be reimbursed for. The other piece that has really come up then is, well, our process there was so that the fundraisers had an idea of exactly how many dollars they needed to raise, and they realized that they would have to raise the dollars, which would be the delta between the grass field and the turf field, the artificial turf field, and if they're adding a team center, which was also part of their plan, that they're responsible for covering all of those pieces, plus also having a plan to contribute towards replacement. So that's part of what that group is looking for feedback on. I think a big piece that is a missing decision from us yet, or they're looking for a decision on us, is will we contribute the equivalency of the grass field in a similar manner that we did for the Warrior Stadium.
Where do you come up with the money for the grass field? 'Cause
Yeah, right now, the two options, and there's a couple nuances within both, of which I think will need to be vetted out further with the budget committee and then brought back to the board, and that would be one I would have Diane Pertzborn present. One of them is a Fund 38 non-referendum debt issue, which is a borrowing. That's a piece like how we bought this facility many years ago. The other piece is you start to look at kind of the fund balance that we're creating with Fund 41 and it being part of the facility maintenance piece. And I think then there's a piece that has to come back that a question, I think, and a policy question is what do you want your fund balance to be in Fund 41? I mean, what's your purpose and use for it? Because really what we have done over the last few years is we are expending our capital projects on an annual basis out of our Fund 10 fund balance. And that was because that was where we needed to move some of our initial exceeding the cap dollars from the 2014 referendum that were earmarked for facilities. So while we spent those items down, we also built up Fund 41 by putting really John's capital maintenance budget into Fund 41. So that's a $500,000 piece. So I think at the end of this fiscal year, we'll be at $1.8 million in the Fund 41. When we go into next fall, we'll be at 2.3 million. So part of the conversation that has to go between Budget Committee and Facilities is moving some of our capital maintenance projects forward that we want to address. Also looking at if we replace the grass field, those pieces of, if you just kind of round number them, they're around $1 million. It still leaves your fund balance at 1.3 million in Fund 41. And I think part of your question then moving forward is what do you want the Fund 41 balance to be, and how do we want to use those funds as part of that? But I think when you look at how would you pay for the contribution towards the equivalency of a grass field, I think Fund 41 is a reasonable place to consider, and also Fund 38 has some value as well, depending on how you want to look at those dollars.
I think that paying for the grass field, or the equivalent of it, is something we're going to have to do eventually anyway. We already know, we got the report that said the field is in terrible condition, doesn't have proper drainage, it's causing it to be flooded. It didn't get to be used, what was it, almost half the games it was scheduled for this, a third. I think about a third of the games it was scheduled for, it couldn't be used. So eventually we have to do it. If we can use that money that we were going to have to spend anyway and marry it with getting an artificial field, well, our maintenance costs went way down, and the ability of the field to be used even more and possibly be rented went way up. So there's a possibility there. Now, saying that, I gotta admit, I am not a fan of Fund 38 with borrowing, only because we know we have a referendum coming up. People are already blaming us for what the village did in reassessment, saying somehow we raised their property taxes, even though we know all they did was shift the property tax burden from one person in Waunakee to another one. So the second person thought they just had a school district increase. No, that's not what happened this year. But that's what they thought. we were lucky with the middle school and the intermediate school when we built it, that basically people didn't see a property tax increase because we did it in a way that it, basically the growth of the village took care of it. I'd love to do that again on this referendum. That was our reason for spacing them out like we did. But we can't do that if we start tacking on small debt that we weren't planning on. So I think we need to pay for our part of the grass field because we're going to pay for it eventually. And again, if we can get a way to make it a better field that takes us less maintenance, great. But doing it in a debt way, I think in the long term hurts us. You know, so I'm thinking we can get it out of Fund 41, but it'd be a mistake not to do it the way we did it with Warrior Stadium and take advantage of the fact that we can get a higher dollar value spending the same amount of money.
I would definitely concur with Dave, and I think it's the right thing to do to treat those entities the same. If we did it for football, I feel if our soccer field was shot, we should do a similar process for soccer.
I just wish that there was greater understanding in the community for how much support the booster groups from a whole host of our activities contribute and really hold up and make possible our programming. I think there's an assumption that it's something that the school board decides and that we have so much money and look at all this, and so much of that is contributed and paid for by parent booster groups, and we need to understand that. What our role is, I think in terms of providing a playable field is a no-brainer, that is something they should be able to count on district funds to do. It's just, it's difficult to communicate the message when they see super fancy scoreboards and fancy uniforms more often than some people think we should have them, and a whole host of other stuff. It all gets muddied up. But this piece of it, I think we need to have a playable field, and I do think that's the district's duty to provide.
It's still not entirely clear to me, and I'm on the facilities committee, as to exactly how the fundraising group is working it in terms of what they are prioritizing between the team center building and the field improvement itself. I don't think anyone really disagrees that the field is a need and the building is a want. It's not lost on me that many people are going to have their feet right across that field, and very few are going to be in that building. And we kind of tossed a little, I guess, a branch to the other athletic groups saying, oh, there'll be a little bit of storage space you can have access to in there, but this is for soccer. It's right next to the field. We can tell softball they can have access to it, but it's designed to be on the field, and it's largely designed just to be for just high school in that building. So I guess I'm hoping that the fundraising group can give us some more clarity as to what their priority is, because there's nothing in that team center that has anything to do with real safety. We're hearing about people need places to go. If there's a trainer, well, we can get a tent for a lot cheaper than that. That's what the NFL uses on the sideline. So team center would be great, but given their fundraising numbers and what they actually have in the bank versus what they have in pledges in the future, I'm hoping we just hear more from them about it before we make that decision.
And I can check with them on, Mike. I think their priority and their goal right now is they're trying to meet both needs, and they're putting forth the message that they're fundraising for that entity. I think part of what they're certainly hoping for is a district contribution, similar to how we did Warrior Stadium. And then I think that's a question that's also being received from some potential future donors, is trying to understand kind of the whole scope of the partnership between the district and the fundraising group.
But one of the things that I thought I heard was there was this major event that they were going to raise. You know.
There was a major, I think there was a large fundraising event. I haven't heard what the outcome of that was. We get an update from them.
Mark?
I think what would be helpful is, to their process is knowing that we will stand behind, or we're willing to stand behind the field portion of it. Because then that defines for their own membership what the fundraiser now becomes. Because if we're going to put a improved field on, and it's not turf, then that's going to limit the number of community groups that are going to be able to use that field because of maintaining the condition of that field. So it's really going to perhaps give incentive to those who want the turf to assist in the fundraising, but until they have clarity from us, are we indeed supporting this? They could be at a point right now where things are sort of neutral for them, and this would help send the marker out that we're going to do this,
and
they
I'm
do that.
supportive of grass feed. You know, we talk about how we're going to get all these people that are going to rent these fields. How many times have we rented out Warrior Stadium?
I think many of it comes during the tournament season, Jack. That's when you get some of the pieces for that, and that's what you'll see here too.
But everybody's putting in turf, so.
And it's a matter. It's the
So
and the major revenue
early
piece.
adopters of turf, you know, got the benefit. Now everybody's putting turf.
There's truth to that. I think the piece that we did with the stadium, and there's a different financial marker there, I understand, is that all the entry fees to Warrior Stadium go into, we take the first 30 grand that goes into that, and that's part of the replacement piece. This group is also knowing that they need to come up with some dollars as part of that. And we also know that there's fewer dollars on the gate receipts for soccer than there is for the football lacrosse piece, depending on kind of all of those. But I think as the piece that from my perspective is we do need to look at that field where we have this opportunity to do it. I think it makes some sense as long as we can, once we have all these dollars together at the March meeting to really get the full picture of it, we'll be able to then be able to say kind of how far are we going to be able to move with the field, the team center, etc. That gives us enough time to then move forward with doing the project this summer if the dollars line up. But I think a message that if we could share with the committee that we in general are in support of the grass field piece, realizing that those bids will be coming in March and we won't be able to give them a solid number till then. I think that's a big piece to help them move their effort forward.
And one other last thought, the possibility also could exist for us to approach the village of Waunakee as they collaborate with us on repair and upgrades to things like the tennis courts that we both use, to the extent that other community recreational soccer groups and traveling teams access that field as well. I don't think it would be out of line to begin at some point asking for that type of collaboration with the village as well.
I guess the challenge I have with 41 is, you know, I think when we started looking at Fund 41, you know, we wanted to make sure that we had some money in a budget, so if we needed a new parking lot, a new roof, all of these things, which, you know, are required, you know, to have good, solid facilities. And now we're saying, okay, we're going to put it on a soccer field. You know, and, you know, just philosophically, when I look at Fund 41, you know, I look at, and we got deferred maintenance, you know, up to Ying and you know, how, we have to get it someplace. And, you know, just philosophically, I have a challenge pulling Fund $41 for a soccer.
And I understand that, Jack. I think part of it is also looking at is, you know, how did we build up our fund? And I think a big question we should look at between facilities and the budget committee is, what do you want that balance to be? I mean, was this set up to be a balance that just continued to grow? Or was there a point where we wanted to make sure that if you had 2 boilers go out in a year, that you had a place to go? Because we're now looking at the Fund 41, and we're pairing that kind of with our Fund 10 as part of our 15% fund balance. So we take a look at those 2 pieces together. So in essence, this is really taking the place with some additional caveats that it can only be used for facility maintenance as really being just a special designated part of our fund balance process. So it's kind of how large do you want it to be, and then at what point and what are the projects that we're okay utilizing it for. From my perspective, the soccer field makes sense because it is a facility piece, it is a facility need, it does fit that requirement. Obviously, you can make the argument that there may be, you can prioritize other things before that, but that is part of it's for those kind of larger type scale projects. So I think there's also some pieces, as I've talked to Steve about, that I would want Diane to weigh in on, is some pieces that are kind of a blending between Fund 41 and Fund 38, a piece that I'm not really prepared to talk on tonight. But I think the feedback you were looking for was to go back to the budget committee to start looking at different options to really find those dollars and seeing how Fund 41, 38, or other dollars from the district could play in together for that purpose. Is that accurate, Mark, from what you needed as a?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And, I think the one subtlety of what you said was this combination of 41 and 10, we have kind of a level we wanted to keep. And as Fund 41 continues to grow, is that something we really makes fiscal sense for the district?
Right.
Or do we need to start using some of that for the maintenance issues that we have? And this is one of them. I mean, we have a failed field now, just like we have a failed chiller earlier in the year. And it's another part of our system that needs to be fixed.
Right.
So,
I mean, a big question we'll have when we get to the referendum dollars, particularly the exceeding the cap item, is do we want to build a levy for more dollars that go into Fund 41 so that your annual expenditure towards facility maintenance can be greater than what it already is?
right.
So that's a part of it too, is that it is a place where dollars come in and dollars go out specifically for facility maintenance.
I think one of the things you've got to do for 41 is look at where, you got that spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm. Right.
When do we have to replace the parking lot? When do we have to do major roof repairs? And how much money are we going to need
That's right.
to do those kind
That's
of
right.
things? So we've got the tools.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of pulling them out of the tools.
That's right.
So when you sit down and start looking at how big does Fund 41 need to be,
Right.
it's got to pair,
Right.
with what those needs are going to be.
Yeah, it's also got to marry up with the conversation that our facilities committee will be dealing with in the next number of meetings, is what are some of the facility maintenance items that are of high priority that need to go referendum wise? And then once you move some of those off, then what's your annual operational piece that you need on an annual basis? I think that's how I'm looking at what you're saying.
Okay, have what you need, Mark? for
Got it,
your
thank you.
budget? Thank you. We also had a human growth and development meeting. The minutes from that meeting are in your folders. I don't know if you want to say much about it. I know that the curriculum committee will probably review that next 2 weeks from today.
Yep, 3:30 on the 27th, and Judy and I will be meeting soon to go over our preparation for the agenda. Just that the committee's making good, steady progress. We do have some parent outreach coming up through a fairly open-ended survey, and we've also scheduled a parent information session that we'll be getting information out to parents this week. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Moving on to our administrative reports, our strategic planning, referendum planning update, Cindy.
Yep, I see Marky, he made it here from his meeting in another community, so I appreciate him fitting us in under a relatively short notice tonight. Last week when we were together, at the middle school for our tour of the high school and middle school and the TLC. I also shared with you some high-level information from Mark's updated report with regards to our community growth. Obviously, there were some questions as we kind of looked at all of that, but wanted to bring Mark in so he could personally answer really what he did from when he did his full-scale review back in the fall of 18 to then what's occurred now with this update a year later. So being able to bring those pieces forward, I appreciate, Mark, you being here, and I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of hit some of those highlights that we discussed.
Thank you, Randy. I know many of you quite well, a couple of you not as well, but it's nice to be back again. None of you look a year older than when I saw you last. So as Randy mentioned, from time to time, we have updated enrollment projections for the district. Broadly speaking, we look at housing unit growth and neighborhood change in the district and try to translate that into enrollment projections. We've looked out to the year 2030. And the last time we did them, actually, I think was in fall 2017. So it's been a few years. So we each year since have been asked to come back and basically say, well, how are things going? What is actually going on in the community? How are is the actual enrollment comparing to the projections we made and so forth? And so this is the continuation of that work. And I understand you've had this presentation for a while now. So some of these slides I'll go through fairly quickly unless you raise your hand and tell me to slow down. So I propose to talk about the housing demographic update and again review the projections against reality. To give you an overview, I finished this in fall 2019, so it's labeled 2019 Housing Development Overview. We've seen in your school district steady housing development in existing subdivisions, particularly in the village of Waunakee. But compared to what we thought in 2017, some new subdivisions have been a little bit slower to launch than we anticipated back then. Those are typically in the Heritage and Arboretum attendance areas, and I'll talk more about those in a moment. However, we have some other new housing development that's anticipated to happen sooner than we projected back in 2017, and that's in the Prairie attendance area, and I'll talk more about that in a moment as well. And the other thing that we're seeing over the last few years in your school district, and particularly in the village of Waunakee, is increased interest in multiple family construction. And the statistic up on the screen tells you why. The vacancy rate for multiple family housing is almost nothing. I mean, 2.2% is basically people moving in and out of the housing. So there is certainly interest among residential developers to build more in your district. The village of Waunakee and town of Westboro are guided by a set of housing policies that haven't changed too much over the years. Within the village, the desire is to maintain no more than 125 single-family housing units per year. As we'll see, it hasn't been terribly difficult to reach that goal over the last several. The village also has a policy that suggests that new developments 75% single-family housing, and with the rest being attached units or being duplexes or multiple family. A key point is that redevelopment projects and senior housing projects are exempted, so a lot of what we've seen on Main Street, for instance, hasn't been subject to those limitations. The village concluded an analysis a little while back that led to kind of exploring housing gaps and things that maybe the village of Waunakee isn't providing in terms of satisfying the housing market. And is continuing to evaluate the implications of that, and it might lead to reconsideration of some of the policies on this page. The Waunakee market continues to be by far the highest valued market for sales of existing single-family homes within Dane County, and is going up significantly. You can see the statistics there up on the screen. So the question is, to what extent are young families being priced out of the school district market for housing when the median sale price of existing homes, that's not new homes, existing homes, is $425,000. We have seen a fairly steady trend in new housing construction. This is data from the village of Waunakee. Housing units permitted between 2010 and 2019, at least through, I think it was October when I cut the study off. About 90 new homes have been built per year since 2013. It's tailing off, that's the dark purple line. It's tailed off a little bit in the last couple of years. That's fairly common throughout Dane County and the state. The housing construction is still strong, but not quite what it was in 2015, 16, 17. However, we have seen in the village more or less a new multiple family housing project every year since 2017. So you see that spike in this planner code, attached housing units. It means more or less apartment units. Your district extends into a portion of the city of Middleton, of course. The Bishop's Bay development in particular feeds houses and students to your district. Bishop's Bay, within the back 9 neighborhood of Bishop's Bay, has had about 20 single-family homes per year built since 2013. Fairly steady. It's pretty much full, the back 9 neighborhood, one of 5 or 6, depending on how you count, neighborhoods that are to be part of Bishop's Bay. That the multiple family in that neighborhood was built out long ago, so there hasn't been any apartment development or condominium, attached condominium or anything else for the past few years in Bishop's Bay. I'll talk a little bit more about the future of Bishop's Bay in a second. Beyond Village of Waunakee and Bishop's Bay, there's not too much additional housing activity in your district. Westport has had 9 single-family homes per year since 2013. Most of that is in Carriage Ridge. Westport, there is the farm and the prairie part of Bishop's Bay that's in Westport. Housing construction there has been relatively slow. There's been 4 total so far over the past year or 2. So some of the things that are on the horizon include additional development from livable communities by Tierney. That includes Golden Ponds. That's the name of what we had called in the past Westbridge North, north of the developed parts of Westbridge development. Arboretum Village, which has been on the drawing boards for a few years now, north of Arboretum Elementary School, and Kilkenny West of County Q towards the intermediate school. They're all expected to break ground either this year, 2020, or next year. So we could see some, additional new, quote unquote, new Tierney developments as opposed to just filling in the ones that exist. And some of those could include some more affordable single-family housing components and some multiple-family development. The phase of Bishop's Bay that's north of what's developed so far, it's called the Town Center and Watermark, but also along Q on the east side. That's slated for multiple family housing development of all types and commercial, retail development, things like that. It could begin construction this year. It's pending a utility project, the extension of a utility by the city of Middleton to that area. So we'll see if that happens this year or next. And then you're mostly, I'm sure, aware of a new development by Viridian Homes, a proposal for a mixed residential development on 160 acres north of Highway 19 here in the village. That development will be in the Prairie Tenants area. That plan has been planned by the Village of Waunakee for residential development for a number of years, but we hadn't, in our 2017 projections, anticipated it to happen until after 2030. So this is a change from what we had projected. This is a concept plan for the development of Heritage Hills. Again, it may have evolved slightly since this time. This was from 6 to 8 weeks ago. And the concept plan that you see up here on the screen includes over 300 single-family houses, about 150 duplex and townhome development, predominantly towards the south end of the project, and some multiple family units, again, mostly towards the south end. The first early phases are southwest, and then depending on how the market goes for different products, the development could head in either more of an easterly direction or more in a northerly direction. How this is different and probably responding to a gap in the housing market is that the single-family homes that are slated to develop here would start in the high 200s, low $300,000 range. So that's quite a bit under what the typical single-family house in the village is selling for. And based on our experience doing projections for other school districts in your area, we know that Viridian developments typically have a fairly strong student generation. They are first-time homes for many young families here at Dane County. We also have seen, and I've alluded to this already, multiple family development projects happening or pending. And again, this has been more or less 1-3 years since 2017. The Lamp House Apartments, higher-end units built and occupied just this past year. The Laurel being built in Kilkenny Farms right now. Full occupancy expected by 2020 this year. And noteworthy is that project falls in a more suburban setting with parks and very nice parks and other amenities in the area, and has 2- and 3-bedroom units in much greater quantity than the sort of the Main Street multiple family has had and the multiple family in Bishop's Bay. This could very well lead to more students per unit than we typically see out of multifamily. And I'll talk more about that in a second. And then finally, there's another project, at least a couple years ago, was a concept plan being bandied about at the Village Plan Commission meeting. It maybe has a name by now, but the address is 701 West Main, west of McDonald's. Redevelopment project, again, slated to have larger bedroom units, and maybe some of those units it's specifically designated to be affordable for moderate income families.
Do you have a timeline on that?
Again, I wish I had talked with the administrator before the meeting. I can certainly get that for you. It was 2020 construction is anticipated. So, the big question is, well, how do these apartment buildings affect student generation? And we grabbed one project that's been around for a while now, the Madison and Main Apartments in downtown Waunakee, and took a look at how many students are actually living in that building. It's got 78 units, mostly 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms. And what we found is that there's 0.13 students per unit that attend your schools. So looking at it another way, it takes 11 or 12 units to get one student, or maybe it's the other way around. Sorry, 8 or 9 units to get one student.
Is this market rate?
It is market rate.
All units are market rate?
Yeah, yes, that's right. Most of the students that are there are high school students. Also, in addition to that, it's the secondary residence for 9 more students. It's probably divorced parents. One parent living in the building, one other parent living somewhere else in Waunakee.
So that doesn't add to our students.
It doesn't add to your students because they're counted, somewhere else. So the 0.13 number is the actual students that aren't counted elsewhere total. And this 0.13 number per unit is fairly typical for multiple family student generation in suburban Dane County. So not a lot of students per unit, but if you have 78 units on, I don't know how many acres this project's on, 5 acres, fairly decent student per acre counts, maybe comparable to single family housing. Yeah.
So do you use that number for all the multi-units for your calculations then, or?
No, it's important for us to understand the bedroom number of bedrooms, whether some of the units are affordable or not. And in fact, it's a good segue, Mark, to the next slide, because I think we think that some of these pending and future multifamily developments will differ from the Madison, Maine. You know, they, again, more suburban units will tend to generate more kids. You've got parks and other amenities that attract people who are living in single-family houses, also attract people living in multiple family units. More, you know, it's hard to fit too many kids in a one-bedroom unit, but you get 2 and certainly 3-bedroom units, and the opportunities for children goes up pretty substantially. And the more affordable we can get, or the community or the developers get the units, the greater the probability of families with kids.
And are the units on Peaceful Valley there that are going up, are those market rate?
They are market rate.
All of them?
Yeah. Yeah, but they also have 2 and 3 bedroom units.
No, I understand.
So, you know, I'd expect, in answer to your question, Mark, you know, for some of these newer projects, you know, we could have 0.25 kids per unit based on what I'm seeing in other communities with similar projects.
Okay.
You know, which is twice as many, I suppose, as the Madison, Maine project. Before I get into this, there is a very interesting model I love talking about. It's off of Parmenter in Middleton, not in your district, in the Cross Plains district. That's a development, a multiple family rental development with 2 and 3 bedroom units and ones, and it's designed for people who earn less than the county median. It's generating for the Middleton Cross Plains district close to half a student per unit. So it does make a difference, and that, you know, compared to single family, it's still lower. Single family houses are, you know, 0.7 to 0.9 per unit at 10 years into their construction, but it's
Do you have a
notable.
projected market rate for a 3-bedroom? You know, 2-bedroom.
Just for a 3-bedroom isolated on its own, I haven't. You mean if a building was 100% 3-bedroom units?
Or are you asking what they would charge?
What
What
it would go
for a
Oh,
month?
for a 3-bedroom, you know, because...
Market rate?
Yeah.
$2,000.
For a 3-bedroom?
Yeah.
At least.
At least.
I think it was on Main Street, 2,000.
They're like $14.50 for 2-bedroom.
The
Yeah,
ones,
it's not-
the new ones at Lamb House, I think from a 1-bedroom, it starts at about 1,100 up to 3 bedrooms, which I believe is $2,200, $2,300 depending on the unit. At least that's last info I heard.
And there are, you know, in some cases, these units are catering to people who are, you know, maybe building a house in Waunakee or elsewhere. You know, maybe again a divorced household where one spouse lives there full time, but also a growing permanent renter population. People who do not, you know, just like they subscribe to Microsoft Word or Netflix or whatever, they subscribe to you know, a housing unit. It's a millennial trend that says, I may or may not be here in 5 years. I don't want to maintain this. I just want to be a renter. It's okay. So it's an interesting phenomenon and nationwide. Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, it's
Because I haven't seen it in the paper, but I'm wondering with the committee work that's being done for affordable housing, are any of these newer units projected to be somewhat subsidized at all for lower incomes?
That 701 Main, the one west of McDonald's,
Okay, that
by
would
the
be
information
one.
I had a couple of years ago, so
Okay.
a certain percentage were, and that's the trend. You rarely see an entire
Entire unit,
development.
right.
Yeah, the idea is to mix and mingle
Right,
folks.
right.
Yeah. Okay, just talk a little bit, now that was housing, that's what we're seeing for housing now, you know, what's going on sort of in the people, both district-wide and the kids that are coming to your schools. Nationally, we have birth rates at an all-time low, at like forever in this nation, the birth rate is at an all-time low. And in fact, the number of live births in the country, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, it was at like a 30 to 40-year low. It was the late 60s. And that's, I mean, the total number of births, where we had a lot fewer people in the nation in 1968 than we have now, is low. So it's people are having fewer kids. That's an undeniable truth. So that's affecting you as well. Some stats here on the screen. Your population, 18 plus, grew by 13% between 2010 and 2018, while your age 0 to 17 population grew by 10% over that period. So you're aging, the population is aging. Births have been flat over the past decade. Kind of a shorthand way of looking at enrollment is how many kindergartners are coming in versus how many seniors are graduating. And we've had relatively steady kindergarten classes and relatively big high school classes graduating over the last decade, actually. This chart is interesting, I suppose, if you're a demographer, but let me just explain it to you, and I think there's a couple key points to grab from it. So this is a cohort kind of chart. This shows how many people are in the district in different age groups. And I'll just pick the little kiddos for a second. The dashed line indicated how many under 5-year-olds were here in 2010. And the purple represents how many are here now, or as close to now as I could get, 2017. And so we do see some growth in the elementary and pre-elementary age groups. But we see some other trends that show us that the folks that are, again, the potential first-time home buyer crowd, 25 to 35, substantially fewer than we had back in 2010. And those are the people that statistically have the most kids. So these kids could be the kids of the 35 to 39-year-olds and 40 to 44. If you're crazy like me, you don't have your first kids until you're older. And so I'm in that sort of group right there. Oh, I wish I was in that sort of group. I was when I had my first. So anyway, it's an interesting age pyramid, and you can see then 50 and plus are just, extremely more people in those age groups than there were in 2010. So, not surprisingly, the birth trend is generally declining, and that's despite the fact that we've got new housing, units being built 90 per year in the village. But it's been, bouncing up and down around 175 over the past 6 or 7 years. This is that kindergarten trend again. The blue line represents the kindergartners coming in. The orange line represents the 12th graders leaving. So recently we've had anywhere between 30 and 60 fewer kindergartners than seniors. So that affects total district enrollment, and certainly. And so these were the projections. I'm sorry, this is the actual student enrollment. I'm sorry. So this is actual student enrollment from the 2015-16 school year to the 2019-2020 school year, as measured with the third Friday in September counts. So from top to bottom, the blue line represents elementary school, increasing slightly over the past 5 years from 1,406 kids to 1,477. That reflects that those younger kids that we saw the purple bars on a few slides ago. High school, these are some of the kids of these, older parents that are, working their way through the school system, and that's where you've seen the most growth over the past 5 years. And relatively flat in the middle in the intermediate and middle school level.
Mark, can I just clarify? Those are actually the head count numbers. That's your residents plus your open enrollment net gain that you have. So that's the actual number of bodies in the school. Because I know some of the other slides, we also talk about the resident.
That's a good point. Thank you very much, and I'll talk about the difference and why we do resident. But this is total students and seats.
Thank you.
Thank you. Starting last year, we took the bold step of kind of comparing our projections to how many kids you actually have, and this is a continuation of that. This is projected housing units, so thinking about where the students are going to be, the brighter the color, the more the students we're projecting between now, or at least 2017 and 2030. They reflect a lot of the Tierney developments in Waunakee, existing and proposed, and Bishop's Bay on the south end. How actual housing development has occurred versus the 2017 projections. We've gone over a lot of this already. In Waunakee, the village, they're building out pretty much as we've projected. Bishop's Bay is building out slower than projected, and we have adjusted those projections down over the years. Arboretum Village, north of the elementary school, and Kilkenny West are projected to open in 2017. We were a little bit more optimistic about them opening sooner, but as you saw, the number of single-family units in the village has tapered off a little bit over the past couple of years, and there was plenty of inventory in Kilkenny and Westbridge to satisfy demand. That's running out, so we're expecting that we will have other developments to infill, including those and the Golden Pond. This is the Westbridge North. Heritage Hills, again, we did not anticipate that to develop for a decade. So one of the questions I ask myself and you is, how will the Waunakee market handle 4 new housing developments at about the same time? Some of them are going to be providing a similar product that we've seen in the past, these $450,000, $550,000 single family. Heritage Hills is going to be providing a different market. So the one theory is that we could see in Waunakee coming closer to that 125 single family units per year, because the more markets will be hit by the new developments coming online. But all of this is dependent on a robust economy continuing, and we've gone a long time now without a recession. I mean, it was a big bad one, but it's been 12 years, 13 years, which is historically a decent length of time. So, not in Waunakee, but I've heard from other developers, they're almost kind of wishing for a mini pullback so they don't have to go through what they went through back in 2008. But if I knew when the next recession was going to come, I wouldn't be talking to you here tonight. Be on some island. This chart is interesting to kind of sit back with and study if you have the time, but what I want you to pull from this is that some of the developments that were thought about in 2017 are happening a little faster, in one case a lot faster. Some of them are happening a little slower. On the whole, the projected development is pretty much as we anticipated back in 2017. It just rearranged a little bit. So that now transitioning from housing to students. So these were our projected resident student enrollment counts that we made back in the 2015 numbers were 2012 projections, and then after that are the numbers, the projections we made in 2017. So we're projecting steady growth at all levels. Some tapering at the high school level as some of the smaller classes come into the high school over the years. But certainly a suggestion that through new housing development and the appeal of the market, we should see a steady crop of elementary school kids continue to roll in. This map is the corollary to the other map I had on. It shows where those kids are, largely where the new development is located. But we can't forget, and my model anticipates what's happening in older neighborhoods too. Some are having more kids as they can turn over to the next generation of families. Some neighborhoods that have a lot of kids right now, by 2030 could have very few kids as those kids grow out, but the parents largely stay in their homes for a while. All right, so this is another kind of chart to kind of absorb. And the dates here are, on the bottom are 2015, 2018, 2019, and 2020. The bars, the blue bar represents actual resident enrollment in the Waunakee district in those years. The orange bar represented the results of what we thought back in 2012 for those years, 2015, 2018, 2019 for resident enrollment. And the gray bar, the final bar, represents our 2017 projection. So of course there's no gray bar in 2015 because 2015 was 2 years before 2017 and so on and so forth. So I'm going to point you to the oval, that's the 2019 number. This is the K4 resident enrollment projection, actual resident enrollment versus our projections. These are residents now, not total students and seats. So in 2019 you had 1,391. We projected 1,471. So our projection in 2017 is higher than the number of resident students in your elementary schools. What does that mean? Well, this is a lot of information. So I'm going to go quickly through this, but one of the things I want you to know I did is that you have this kind of forced transfer situation. There's too many Arboretum's over capacity, and each year some students get transferred from Arboretum to one of the other two elementary schools. So this is my explanation of how we accounted for that, those transfers, because they are not accounted for in our projections. In other words, our projections assume that every single kid that's in the Arboretum attendance area will be able to go to Arboretum school. All right. So what does that mean? Arboretum, for the 3 elementary schools, Arboretum attendance area enrollment is in line with our 2017 projections, assuming there were no forced transfers. But Heritage will not reach the 530 students that we projected for it next September. Why? Bishop's Bay is just not accelerated as projected. And now that they've kind of filled the tested product in the back 9, it'll probably take a little while to gain momentum in the other development areas of Bishop's Bay, in my opinion. We also, Kilkenny West is in the Heritage area. We projected that to break ground in fall of 2018, thereby generating students. Next September, that's not going to happen. It's just going to break ground in 2020. There could be, I suppose, a student or two in the first kind of pioneer homes there, but not a lot.
Kilkenny West is just west of Kew and Woodland? Is that?
That's west of Kew, south of Woodland. Yeah. Yep.
And how many homes are they projecting in?
Oh, I would be guessing right now, but I think it's on the order of somewhere between 200 and 300 I'd build out. Prairie, there's a big 4th grade class there this year. Could have an enrollment decrease next year just because of that. It's a kind of a bubble class there. But our 2020 Prairie projection may be a little bit high. So our over projection, if you will, for elementary schools is mostly at Heritage. I start to look a little bit better when we look at the higher grade groups. And it makes sense. These kids are in your school system already. It's a little easier to project kids that are here than kids that may come here. But at the intermediate school, our projections are pretty much on target to what you have in your district. We've got a bubble class, the current 5th grade. So we think that in any way, when you factor in that bubble class, our projection will pretty much be on target. 638 kids next year at the intermediate school. Grade 7, 8. So this tells me we should have stuck with our 2012 model of projecting. The actual resident enrollment at the middle school is 609 this September. Our 2012 projection was 617. When we redid them again in 2017, we thought there would be 650. That's not going to happen unless something changes significantly.
Randy, isn't that actually 644 though?
Right, and that's the issue between resident versus.
This is based on.
This is all residents, so we can
I'm
compare
sorry,
apples to
I'm sorry.
apples. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So that's a very, yeah, it can't be emphasized enough. I mean, you know, why don't I just project total enrollment? I could. The reason we choose to pick resident enrollment for our projections are two. The first one is when a school approaches capacity, the ability to accept open enrollees in diminishes to, you know, theoretically nothing. So we didn't want to project open enrollees in that kind of scenario, constraint scenario. And the second one is it's a little bit hard to project open enrollment. It's influenced by a lot of factors, state policy, what other school districts in your area are doing or not doing, building schools or not. So it's a little bit difficult kind of proposition. But the reality is that your district has been a net open enrollment in district for many, many years. So it's a fairly, you know, comparatively to other districts, fairly predictable number. So for middle school, which I know is the focus of your conversation recently, so we would expect that your actual 2020 to 21 resident enrollment should be 590 to 600 students. That's based on kind of our progressing your current students upward. But we also believe that by 2021 and 2022, given new growth and development in some bubble classes, that resident enrollment at the middle school could rebound to 625, 635, something of that order. So, getting back to our 2025 projection for the middle school of 656 resident enrollees, we think that seems about right. It's just not going to happen as quickly as we thought 2.5 years ago. That makes sense. High school, we pretty much hit the mark. Again, a little easier to predict high school. Finally, a lot of repeat here. Projected influx of more affordable single-family housing in 2 and 3 bedrooms might accelerate housing unit development and student generation. It's not. There's a number of different flavors on the books and coming into your district, and many of those flavors typically generate a lot of students. Talked about this, some developments faster than expected, the Viridian one at the top of the list, but other developments are going slower than expected. So you got to balance the either enthusiasm or fear with those other things that are happening in the community as well, either slower or faster. And I think that really concludes the presentation. I'm sorry, I'm sure I went longer than you hoped I would.
Good information.
It's important information. Any questions for Mark?
So on the new apartment building that they just opened up on Main Street, Hubkey property, how many units are there?
I would really be guessing on that one, so I could research that before you have got that information. I just don't have it in my time.
And you would suspect that that apartment building would bring in about the same number of students as the 7 or
Madison and Maine. Yeah, it's similar in unit mix. It's Madison and Maine. Yeah.
I think it's 63.
63.
I think it's supposed to be 61 when they were built it.
Oops.
Mark?
So Mark, in your projections, and I apologize if I sound dumb, but if you have 75 new houses going in per year in the village,
Yeah.
which I think is what I saw.
About 90.
About 90.
Yeah.
So do you project a half a child per house then in your projections, or don't you count those into the projections at all? You don't know.
It's a little more complicated than that. Depends on the development, where it's located in the community, who the target market is for development. where it is in the evolution. So the short story is that you guys in the district have typically generated between 0.7 and 0.95 students per unit. That's been going down over the years to closer to that 0.75. So we, broadly speaking, we apply a 0.75 times
Okay, so about,
0.9.
okay. All right.
But that doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily have 65 or whatever that equals new students, because there's existing housing in the community, some of which has generated fewer kids. You've got a large baby boom population, and their kids are largely grown up or growing up.
Got it, okay.
A lot of people came here in the 1990s,
Sure.
and their kids are, leaving the district.
So you said Maine and Madison apartment has 78 units, about 0.13 per kid per unit.
Yep.
And I think what I heard was 9 of those are dual address?
No, that's in addition to the 0.13. Sorry for the confusion.
Okay.
But, there may be more kids roaming around those apartments but you'd be double counting them if you,
Right.
that was, I suppose, my point.
Okay. Understood.
I may be trying to be too clever, but it's an interesting, it's an interesting dynamic.
Demographic connect.
Yeah, they're kids that are, have 2 households.
Yeah. Understood.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be having additional dialogues around this, and if there's some questions that come out, I'll be in touch with you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, Mark.
Thank you. Moving on the agenda, the next topic is a 90-day outlook.
Okay, what I want to do for just a moment is give you an idea of what's coming. And I realize my outline here goes longer than 90 days. But I think I want to really give a picture of really where we're headed, particularly as we look at some of our big referendum markers, and really where some decision points are. So at the very, very bottom here, August 10th, so end of this coming summer, is when we will actually be adopting referendum resolutions. So that's the point when you are actually making the decision, you have the language from our attorneys, and you're going to adopt a resolution that says this is going on the ballot for November. So if you kind of work its way backwards, that's really the intent here. So when you start looking at like communications about where are you sending out flyers that explain all the different pieces, many of those things come after we make those final decisions. You have your final plans. That push comes at that point. Everything else from here up is all of our planning pieces. And what I've included in here is every one of our board meetings. And then you'll just see that I have to be determined as far as what committees will meet that month. But just to give you really an idea between now and March, which is when we have spring break, a few things that I want to bring to your attention. Obviously, we're here tonight with our meeting. Mark was here to present that information. We have boards. We have a number of us going to the School Boards Convention in Milwaukee next week. January 27th, we have that additional board meeting where we have our curriculum presentations. So that's coming at that point. We will, tonight when we get to the end of our agenda, I need to schedule facilities, budget, HR policy. Joan, you had mentioned wanting to add a goals committee to that. So that's a piece that we'll have a conversation about up there. February 10th, when we take a look at some of the work that we've done over the last month or so and before break, we talked about heritage. We talked about a little bit about some of the things with like a potential option being a new middle school type thing. All of these different variables that come together. We're going to have some high level costs to some of those options coming at the February board meeting. So what that is going to be is an informational item that will then lead in to really a board workshop where we're going to come together, dive a little bit more into those. And this process is really to now start narrowing our pathways, narrowing our options, particularly now that we have some cost numbers to at least in a very broad, high level put to it. One of the pieces that our EUA communications team asked me to bring forward tonight was the idea of having really a meeting sometime in mid-February. We just earmarked the 13th as really just a community meeting. We let people know that we're going to be talking about some of the things that we're discussing as far as potential referendums, growth, some of the aspects of what we're concerned about, and laying out just some information. Not with plans, not with dollars, not with tax impact, but just a communication meeting of that sort taking place sometime in February. What I shared with our communications team was I would bring that back to the board to get your feedback on if you like that idea, do you like that timing as far as being able to really stand up, provide information, probably answer any questions, but we're not going to have a lot of specifics.
So is that something you would like foresee holding at the high school PAC and just?
That was kind of their general idea. I mean, obviously, when you get to needing to share information out, particularly with all of our specifics, you got to push out. You can't have just PAC meetings. But their initial thought was to have a couple different ones that you can invite people in who are interested, who are following it. We can hopefully have Tim there to follow some things with the newspaper. We can get some press releases out, information out on social media that really share some of the information that we're sharing. They built in 2 of these, one in February and then one here, and a date to be determined sometime in May. And then obviously once you get to the point where you have your resolution set, you definitely have a communications campaign moving forward as far as all the specific details. But looking at some different ways that we could at least provide information and updates for those who are interested, and also give us a venue to interact with some of our local media. So I guess my thought was I wanted to get your aspect or your response to that. Do you like that model to be included as an information sharing piece, and do you like the timing of it?
I think it's really important to go to the public. I just would encourage gathering of thoughts as well as updating our thoughts so that, you know, we make sure that the public has an opportunity to speak and give us their ideas. Because that is so soon. I mean, we are so, our scope is so wide right now.
And so let me speak to that, Joan, because there's another piece in here I didn't bring up to you,
Yeah.
and that's the community workshop in March. So that's a piece what our communications team is conceptualizing is really these early meeting being, we're going to present information to the public on really what's on our plate. What are we talking about? Why are we talking about it? What are some of the big rocks that we are having conversations about, and how are we starting to narrow these? But as we start to work through these with the board workshops, and I also have a few staff workshops in here too where we can get their input. There is one here in mid-March that's a community workshop. Now we've done some narrowing of our pieces. We would have a community piece where that would be led by administration, board, EUA, our partners with Vogel, to really look at input from the community on the different aspects. That's going to all layer into some feedback that'll lead into our survey. So we'll have a survey that goes out to the community. As we start to narrow these options, we'll have some feedback on kind of where people initially think on that and help us narrow that further to launch a survey here in April. And then as we get those survey results back, it further moves us quicker into really defining our scope. But those are the pieces that are conceptually being really put together as we kind of map things out from August backwards. Jack?
You know, I guess touring, having both these special meetings, touring these facilities, understanding referendum, maintenance, exceeding the cap, all of that kind of stuff. You know, I think November is way too soon for a referendum. That's my personal opinion, because I think there's got to be a lot of stuff ferreted out. And you're just ramming this thing through, or it's being ramrodded through. When you look at one of the topics we're going to be talking about is open enrollment here, and you know, just looking at the numbers, you know, yeah, we've got one big class of, 6th grade class of 361, and how do we handle that? But the 5th grade is 312, and then you start going into, you know, under 300, and you've got 4K coming in that's under projection, and according to Steve, that kind of dictates what the kindergarten class is going to be. And, you know, we look at these numbers, 82 units at 20 a quarter, that's 28 students, that's over the range. You know, the Maine and Madison is already there, so those students are here. You know, the Hovde is probably, you know, that's filling up, so, you know, that's 8 students if you go on that 0.13 ratio. And yeah, you know, we've got some things that are coming, you know, like the heritage farms, or, you know, but that's, you know, a year or two out, even though they start breaking ground next summer if everything gets approved. You know,
one of the things I think we're going to be looking at here, Jack, and that's the piece, it fits in very well with starting to get into more of these board workshops, is starting to look at what do you want in the referendum and what do you want. And right now we've thrown a broad range. That's kind of what the last diagram that we showed a couple of board meetings ago, we showed it again at Heritage, we showed it at the middle school, is now starting to look at your enrollment pieces, also looking at the scope of what you want or potentially want to do at any of the buildings. And that was the question that we posed, is how do you want to stage these pieces?
Yeah.
You can do them in the whole aggregate together, or you can disaggregate them out into different phases. That's a piece that I think we have to start to narrow down as far as what our options are. And it's either one of those have pieces to them what we have to consider. But I think to your question is a key one, as far as saying, as a board member, you'd like to know what's that referendum in 2020 going to look like. That hasn't been decided yet. Right now, we've thrown all the variables out, and we have to decide what that piece is. And that's really what all of these meetings between now and, well, actually into the summer start to do. By that survey, you should have a pretty good idea, or you're going to be surveying on some of the pieces that you have questions about. So I think that's the part that you have to find out. You have to listen.
The other thing that we talked about is if we go out for, you know, over $100 million referendum, we can save $10 million. Mm-hmm. And, you know, at the end of the day, you're borrowing money at different phases. And when we sit down and say 120 million or 125 million, 100 million, what we're making the assumption on, and I think Mark brought it up, is who's got that crystal ball to say the economy's going to fall apart? Mm-hmm. And if the economy falls apart, you know, you could go out for another referendum and save money. You know, and who's to say that, you know, when you put the projections in there, you know, you're saying, okay, you do this project, you're just increasing it by CPI, so it's a guess. So, you know, we're going out and saying we're saving it. If we go out for a big referendum, we're saving you $10 million, and I don't know where that is.
Right. And the piece you have to go back to the $10 million in the exercise that we did, I believe was it last summer,
Yeah.
Is that about when it fell, was a piece that was asked for from a strictly financial analysis. That was all it was. I mean, and you're right.
Yeah.
Where's the dollars? The dollars are in inflation and ability to be flexible within that time frame.
And the interest rates.
Correct.
Inflation.
Absolutely.
Inflation.
So it's
and
all of those
interest rates,
pieces.
is basically it.
Right.
And you know, you're still going to borrow the money. You're still going to go pull the money in year 8 or year 5. Mm-hmm. So you're still going to pay those rates.
It seems to me this process gets us to those decisions. And we haven't made those decisions. I mean,
Right.
this could be a decision to go to a three-phase building project
right,
over
exactly.
10 years.
Yes.
That's correct.
Yeah, so we haven't made that decision. What we're
Correct.
looking at are what are our needs, and we've got to determine what are the immediate needs. And I don't think that's been predetermined by anybody.
No.
I
We've
don't
been
either.
brainstorming stuff, but this allows us to reach that decision point, I think, in a reasonable way.
Right.
And I think all the things, Jack, that you're bringing up have to be vetted in these
Exactly.
different meetings. And I think that part of this, you even start
Well,
looking.
I hope it happens as we vet these things out.
Well,
You know,
it-
Well,
because,
we're already making progress on that.
yeah.
Look,
I mean, when we take a look at just our meeting we had at Heritage, we walked out of there with 4 options.
right,
And so now part of what you'll start to see is, you'll start to see some of those costs come back. And we've got to then make some decisions as far as which ones do you like to kind of vet out, which ones do we move forward to pieces with our survey. We can't survey every single detail.
No, I
That's a
understand
piece we've got, so we've got to start ferreting this down. But I think it's a piece then, it's the question that you have is how do we lay that in with when do you build? When, and how does your timing go given your projections? Some of those may be some really good pieces that we want as part of our community workshop too. They may be part of our survey to have those conversations and say, here's where we're at. Here's kind of the pieces that are on the table. How do we want to launch them?
Yeah.
But that's what we're leading up to. That's really what that process is. But this gives you a little bit of the landscape of August 10th is where you have to have your final decision if you're going to referendum in November. If you choose not to, then you don't have a vote on August 10th. That's kind of how that all works. But this piece is just kind of laying it out as far as how we'll start to narrow those down. From my perspective, we need to start finding those places where we can make different incremental decisions so that when we get to starting to put that survey together, we have specific things we want to test community-wise. But this gives you a general picture of really what we're trying to do and what we're shooting for and how we're working it backwards.
Thank you.
You bring up the point, Jack, about we can't say that a projected number is going to be exact. You can't. But I think the one thing we did just hear was that 5 years ago, we said the middle school at getting near this time frame, we were going to have to do something. We did the short-term thing of taking those 2 mobile classrooms and throwing them behind the middle school. We've thrown out 2 of the 3 computer labs and converted them into classrooms. We've changed storage rooms
You know,
to
going
all
to the
that stuff.
computer rooms,
Now,
you know,
hang on.
I understand.
Hang on.
But you bring that up and say, okay, we threw out the computer rooms, but we did give computers and we're changing the way we're educating.
You're right, but
So-
a building has an infrastructure to support X number of students. We have gone beyond that already from the original middle school. And he just confirmed that the 2025 number that he was expecting seems right on track. And the 2025 number is 100 students more than we have today in that same school. That right now, we don't have enough classroom space. It's
But-
maxed out.
But if you look at.
If we wait- if we wait
if you
3
look at the
more
numbers-
years.
If you look at the numbers of classes, the students coming in, they're under 300.
Jack, just look at his slide on the numbers in the middle school in 2025. It's 730. Today, we are at 638. Now, you can say, there's one class back here that's 300. Yeah, but when I take 300 and 350 and I add them to 350, I'm at 700. And I'm over what we have in the school today, which we heard was what, 620 something? Was what we said last week at the school.
We have 640 in there right now.
640. So we're going to be at 730 in 5 years. If we wait 2 to 3 years to do the referendum and then try to build the school, we're too late. You have to build the classrooms for the numbers that are going to be there in that year. You can't build it 3 years after the students are there. Where are you going to put them? We already have 2 mobile classrooms sitting out back that nobody likes. I mean, are we going to buy more mobile classrooms in 2 years because we didn't get ready ahead of time? the problem with our referendum is it's a 5-year window. We're not necessarily building the middle school that, the following summer. We've already talked about waiting.
Dave, all I'm saying is that look at the numbers. You know, the 4K is 227, full day kindergarten is 282, first grade is 295. You know, you get second grade at 309, third grade is 284. You know, those are the numbers that are coming in. I'm not making them up.
But
Yeah,
we've
but-
seen that every year.
But we also have seen our enrollments go up 68 students a year on average.
Yeah.
Yeah, on top of those numbers.
What did we have?
On top of
this
those
year,
numbers.
34?
This year was 40.
It was 40-some, not that
40
big,
something.
so.
Last year was
Yeah.
63.
What you
That was
see, and I
68.
think there was a slide I brought in at one point that showed where our 4K and kindergarten numbers were and then how those tracked through 12th grade. So I'll have to
Right.
bring that piece back.
Those class sizes always grow. They don't
The
stay
other-
at that number.
Yeah, the
But
other
isn't this
piece-
part of our next discussion?
It
And
is.
and
this
that's the
is-
point.
it's-
We have to have
it's
this
part of
laid
our
out. I
discussion.
appreciate having this laid out because there's no way we'll get there
Right.
unless we take it a piece at a time.
One of our future meetings has to be on the middle school piece.
Right.
And it has to have two different parts to it.
Right.
One is looking at, if we choose to build a new middle school, what does that look like? So that's a piece that you'll start to see some early numbers. We've done some of the programming for it already, but you have to learn about what that looks like on the site and how large that is. The second piece Marcy's working on for me, which was the feedback from the last meeting, which was how was the building created and how was it used in 1992?
Right.
How did it change in 2006 and how is it used today? So
Perfect.
she's working with some of those staff who've been in the building the entire scope of time to kind of pull that together. So that's a piece that I just got today. So we'll bring that piece forward. But that's all going to be part of this process, and that was the purpose of laying out the timeline.
Great.
No, it's good. Thank you.
Look
All right,
forward
no
to
problem.
it.
Be a
Okay,
great next meeting.
moving on to class size policy review and then open enrollment
All right.
capacity and that will
So
happen.
so let me explain what I've done here, why I have a couple different agenda items. First of all, I put the class size policy review on there for two purposes. One, for just your information, because class size policy is what plays into the open enrollment policy. The number of openings that we will be selecting or choosing for next year, we have to decide tonight, and that is built on the only places we have openings are places that have capacity underneath optimal. My belief is we probably don't need to change the policy tonight, given some of the options that we have in front of us. But should there be a desire to manipulate any of the pieces and move your optimal number down, I did check with our council at the School Board Association. We could do that tonight. We would just have to make that vote first before you voted on the open enrollment capacity. So I'm going to kind of meld these into two, but that was kind of the reason that's there. If nothing else, it's just an information item. The second piece, if I can have you pull it up, and I'm going to stand up and have you start. We're going to start at the easy part at the bottom and work our way up. What Steve has done here is he's put, there's not a recommendation on this chart, so let me explain what you have first of all. You have two charts that are basically identical as far as what they're trying to accomplish. They're just trying to give you an idea of how many openings would be available under a few different scenarios. This is our traditional just cast forward. How many sections do we have right now, and are there any areas where we think that we would, we know we're going to need to add staff? So for example, when you look at 5th and 6th grade here, we know we're adding 2 sections to the intermediate school just based on enrollment pieces there. So that's why that's highlighted in yellow, for no other reason than to show that we're adding 2 spots there. And then the other places off on the right-hand side, he's just done a few more pieces to show some what-if scenarios. One of the pieces that Steve also did was he met with the principals at the different levels that have some areas for decision-making to get their input and some of their recommendations of how they would see some of these being structured. But let's start with the easy ones first and work at the bottom. When you look at where we are for our enrollment, our number of sections for primarily our classes that everybody has to take at the different levels, We have no openings for open enrollment under any scenario, so at the high school. So, middle school, one of the things that we have with the middle school is we have a relatively static number of sections that we offer, and you're just basically having some gradations in class size, pushing up to the max and some below. We also have not been responsive to just trying to be too reactive to bubble classes coming in. So what you are seeing here is creating 15 sections, staying exactly with where we've been this year. That's our recommendation to continue. It does create some openings, 14 and 23 at the middle school. However, I don't think that should cause us concern, because when we look back to last year, we had 28 openings in 7th grade. We had 2 enrollees. So our trend is not to see open enrollment really coming in. You get a few kids at these upper levels, but they mainly come in lower at their elementary level.
Okay, so that's based upon 30 kids per classroom?
That's based on optimal numbers. So this is
Bill,
Which
open
is
enrollment?
22.
Optimal class size is 22.
Yeah, your optimal class size is 22. It gives you your class size, and then that tells, so this moves, these numbers are what it would take to move these numbers up to optimal.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, so that's, you're basically filling in the gap is what you'll have to allow for. We're very fortunate we have a class size policy, because that's really what we're tied back to. Districts that don't have that have a little bit more challenge in putting these numbers together. Second of all, now let's go up to the intermediate school. Now this is a piece, you can see it's highlighted, because we feel we need to add 2. We're going to add through the budget piece this year 2 sections, just based on the enrollment coming through. There's a couple different ways we can layer that in. An equal number of 15, or the one that Chris has actually recommended in her preferred model that her and Tim would like, is 14 in 5th grade and 16 in 6th grade. They felt that that was just a better way that they would be able to deliver each of their class sizes and their grades. That would yield 10 openings and 7 openings respectively for the intermediate school. Okay. If you can scroll down to the next one. That's good. All right. 4th grade is not a decision you have to make tonight, but it's probably an area where we're going to want to add a teacher for next year. So this is off 13 sections. This is off 14. Really doesn't play into your decision tonight, because under either scenario you have a 0. So that's not really one that you need to worry about, but you will. It's more of a forecast of what you will see as we move forward through the budget process. We'll add a teacher there. 2nd grade is a very similar type situation. We will most likely add a teacher in 2nd grade, but whether it's 14 or 15, it's still at or above optimal, so there's no additional students that would be added at 2nd grade. The piece where we have to do a little bit of discussion here tonight, and we do have some thoughts on this, is really when we start to look at 4K and then the full day kindergarten. And this was the piece that Jack was talking about. We had a very low class. I'm hoping it's just a low dip bubble class last year at 4K where it was low. So when you move that piece forward, it has the potential to create, if you wanted to, more class capacity in 4K. As Steve and Amy Johnson took a look at it, their recommendation would be to look at this model on the left-hand side with 13 sections, which would allow 33 openings. Last year we allowed 28, and then we were trying to see how we could add some additional students who were on a waiting list, and we weren't able to. So I would say if we had 33 openings, we would probably get very close to that number as far as being able to add those students in. Now, a piece that we can take a look at is what happens if you change. Well, you can see what happens when you change the number of sections, but one piece you could do, and it would be one that I would do just cautiously, making sure you know exactly what you're accomplishing, is if you change what your optimal class size is. That's the policy. So if you drop the optimal class size here down to 18, it does change how many open enrollment openings you have. The piece I think we have to kind of look at is what's that balance with open enrollment as far as spaces and students we're bringing in versus also the revenue that comes along with them. Each student roughly carries with them about $7,000 in revenue. So there's kind of that piece of the balancing part. But those are the options that I see in front of you really fall mainly with that 4K and full day kindergarten. And I believe that the recommendation or the preference as far as how that would be structured would be in this area with 13 and 14, which would allow 33 and 18 at those grade levels.
So you could go with the preferred options for certain grade levels on the right side and still go with the 13 for the 4K.
This is just us. This is
Yeah,
our
yeah.
working document. There's
Yeah,
nothing
yeah,
else.
yeah.
What
So you
we
can
will
mesh them
do,
together.
yeah, what we will do is you don't have to pick a left or a right.
Yeah.
We can mix and match between them. And that'll be a piece that Rebecca and I will put together tomorrow. But this was just an illustrative view of kind of what some different scenarios look like when you look at different class sizes.
What's the effect of having more open enrollment at the early grade, because then they're in here forever?
There's truth to that. I mean, that is a place when you start to see where is the entry point for many of our open enrollment kids. It's at the lower level.
So if we reduce our optimum class size, you've reduced open enrollment.
You reduce open enrollment.
Or maintain this section. So if you went with 13, it wouldn't go up any.
Now, if you maintain 13, you're going to stay at 33. If you don't like 33, but you want to stay with 13, you can drop your optimal class size. But you're playing around with your class size policy a bit. I mean, we have a minimum, an optimal, and a maximum. I mean, this would, in my view, is that the movement of the optimal probably doesn't have a functional impact as far as how you're implementing it. It's going to impact you on your open enrollment here. So if you were looking at that as a strategy, as a piece to look at your policy from an open enrollment perspective, that's something you can do. But you also, I think, have to then look at, is that how you want policy implemented over time as we start looking at class size? That's
Is there any pedagogical reason for having a lower class size in those?
sure,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, that's why you had safe classrooms for low income students.
You're going to tell us the reason here. Said Syria.
Good job. Good job. No, absolutely. I mean, dropping, the challenge you have, and Joan and I have had this conversation,
Yeah.
is you'd love to drop your class size. But your impact at the elementary to drop class size today, it's much more complicated than hiring a teacher. Because I'll lower the class size at Prairie, but I'll keep it high at Heritage. Unless I start, and when we get to the point of redistricting where kids go, and you have a strategy to say our target is X class size, where you can then put more teachers into distributed classes, then you can drop it as a district.
So we can change class policy, I mean, we can't change optimum until we think of
Could. I mean,
redistricting.
it's depending on how you look at the optimal. Because right now, I don't have most of our classes right now really aren't at optimal. They're pushing max.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just what happens when you hit that growth factor and you're moving there. So many of our classes are nearing the maximum. By dropping it down to 18 here tonight, if that was a choice you did, it would impact your open enrollment. And it would impact your open enrollment moving forward if you continued with that. But I wouldn't be able to commit to you that moving into next school year that all of a sudden our classes are dropping down to 18. We don't have the capacity to do that. But this would be a factor to consider if your goal was to drop these numbers down. But along with that, you also lose the revenue that comes with each one of those kids. So it's really a piece that's a balancing act as far as where you're comfortable.
So are you saying we have to offer those numbers because it's based on our
Policies.
I'm not comfortable at all with
So-
opening up 33
So right now, what we have, if we have 13 sections, and our current policies for open enrollment are tied to our class size policy, it automatically generates 33 openings.
That's state law requiring us to
Now,
do
because
that.
And the
It's-
only way we can lower that number is to lower optimal class size.
Or reduce the
We
number of sections.
can't just say we don't have the openings.
No.
So if we reduce the number of sections, then that would
I
obviously.
mean, this is part of what state law has forced us to do, is they're having us make a decision based on, in January, on what we're projecting could happen in September. And it's built off of, you have to have those, when we did all the policy pieces, they were done specifically to tie our open enrollment policy to the optimal level, because we felt that we're not going to let anybody in if we have high class sizes. So it's only going to be in those areas where we're below optimal is where we'll have space, which is why you have so many zeros on many other, I mean, you can see first grade, second grade, fourth grade, those are all zeros based on our policy and how we implement it per the sections. So like, remember last year, we were at 28. We did fill all those sections. But the only way you're going to drop this number down is by needing to make a change in really the optimal class size.
How different is that number from what we had last year? It's the same as,
28.
We had 28 last year, I believe.
no, but we had, how many
20.
openings did we have? No, we didn't have 20 openings. We had more than that, because we took 20.
Last year, we had 28 openings and we had 28 enrollees.
Right.
But we had, I think we had 30 or 31 applications, so we took 28 out of 31. We had room for more, and we couldn't take them.
So did we end up having more students than we wanted? In other words, did we get the number of move-ins that made us uncomfortable?
No.
And wasn't it last year where our actual kids, our resident kids that came to 4K were smaller than we thought?
Right.
And then we couldn't fill
Exactly,
them with
that's right.
open enrollment because we had made that level. I'm not uncomfortable with 33
No,
at all
not at
because
all.
we don't know what our residents are going to do.
Now, the other piece, I think, Julie, I think someone asked this before, is when you let in 33 kids, however many you let in at 4K, how many kids actually stay with us going into kindergarten?
Right, yeah.
So Julie pulled that information for us. She actually pulled it for Amy Johnson a while ago, and she shared it with me. So right now, last year we had about 63% of our kids who moved with us, who stayed here.
Oh, who
So-
stayed?
Who stayed. And then the other ones
But
either
that's a
chose.
pretty significant drop.
So you had 20, yeah, you had 20, so the number she had was 27. She had 1 moved. She had 7 returned to their home district. 2 went to private school.
Yeah,
And so we were down to 17. So out of the 28, we received 17.
okay.
So there is a factor of, some people do use it for that purpose. Over the
For that
last
1
3
year.
years, we went in 17, 18, we had 29 we allowed in, and 22 stayed. The year prior to that, in 16, 17, we had 29 students, and 20 stayed. So it does drop down. You're averaging probably between 65 and 70% that are staying. So really what I need some direction from the board is really on those areas. I think from an administrative comfort level, we're comfortable with that, given where it kind of balances off our size of classes and also with where we're at from a financial standpoint.
It seems our optimal size is functioning at this point in that regard. If we were going to be looking at changing optimal sizes, I guess I'd like to be looking at other reasons for it.
And it may be a piece we want to look at in a broader sense and also revisit how that interacts with our policy.
I mean, the one that hit me, quite frankly, was how we have a maximum size of 25 in 5th and 6th grade, and it goes up to 30 for 6th, 7th, and 8th, and 9 through 12.
And did you see 12 is 32?
I did have 33 actually, some of
Yeah.
them, and
We
but for a
got
lab
a-
class, it's
Right.
considered okay. And I'm wondering what's changed in the delivery process that in those years that makes 25 the max versus 30. And so there's a broader question that I might like to revisit on another night.
Yeah.
But in terms of open enrollment, I'm not sure that our numbers have any need to change.
I mean, one of the questions, and it's an aside to this, that I think needs to be a conversation in one of our previous agenda item where we were talking about the referendum is, where do you want class size to go?
Right.
Because I
And
think
how's that
that's
feel
a
with
piece-
our older,
Because that's an investment.
Older
Joe.
kids.
That's right.
That's
And
right.
it's all the way through. It's the high school pieces as far as where do you add staff in, and it's at the elementary level, where do you add sections?
And delivery of curriculum with
Right.
how things have changed in the last
Right.
10 years.
So getting back to this piece here, we've had the high school, the middle school, the intermediate, we explained. Getting up here to the elementary, really the decision point is with regards to the 4K and the kindergarten. And I guess that's where I'm asking for any further input as far as what your comfort level is with
Do
those.
you need a motion?
I need a motion on the whole thing for us to move forward to, that we have to have available and open to the public so they know how many openings we have.
I got a quick question here. If we're saying that our middle school is overcrowded, how do you come up with 27 seats open?
Well, it's, you come up with these, with the 14 and 23, based on, because these are built off of your enrollment for next year. It's built off of, you have that bubble class that's coming in for the 2 years, and we're maintaining the number of teachers, which drops the class size down, which falls underneath the optimal level. So we have some smaller class sizes. is what we
That's
have.
not connected to the building capacity. That's connected to the classroom size,
Classroom size, right.
which is a different thing.
Yeah. And last year we had 28 and only 2 came, so.
Yeah, it's built off of your sections here. That plays a part of it, that we're maintaining that number of sections of teachers.
Saying there's 15 sections, saying that we're gonna run 15 sections at 7th grade, doesn't mean you have 15 classrooms. It means you're running 15 sections,
running
and you're gonna have to
15
figure out how to make
Where to
them all
put
sit
them.
inside that building.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a different equation.
Correct.
Okay, so I move that we
We need to
accept
go do
this
another tour.
model with an emphasis of going with the current optimal level 4 on the left side that we have at 20.
So we'll have, so just to kind of reiterate what I think you're going to say is the 33 and 18 for
Yes.
K and 4. We will then do for,
5th and 6th,
Fifth and
I would
sixth.
like to take the principal's recommendation
Yes.
and do, if that's what they're
That's what they want,
recommending,
right.
that
That's their
seems to be
recommendation.
better
Yep.
use of.
so that's the recommendations
Yeah.
from the principals, which then opens up the number associated with that. And then the other ones,
are the
middle
same.
school
Are
doesn't
0.
change and the high school is 0.
Correct.
So that's the recommendation.
Second.
Don't forget the special ed part.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, do we,
I'm
are we
gonna
gonna do
ask
that
her-
separate? Can we do that motion
We do that
separate
separately?
since we have this on the table?
Yes, sure. we can do that
So
separately.
any other discussion, we have a motion and a second on the table for the left side, middle,
For 4K and kindergarten, and the right side for the rest.
Yeah,
So, and as a related topic, at some point, I do think we need to relook at the optimal and maximum class sizes, especially for 4K and kindergarten.
yes,
The needs we're seeing in kindergarten in
Yes.
particular,
yes.
Right.
that needs to be looked at again.
Sure.
And we should be talking to some teachers.
Yes, agreed. So, any other discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion on enrollment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
All right.
We were just talking.
Thank you, Kurt. I was
You're all good.
moving too fast to do that.
Distracting me.
So I'm going to can I have you take the special ed one?
Sure, this is pretty easy.
0.
If you want to bring up the attachment for the special ed. So where I start is I get the information from Steve, because until I know the regular education space, I can't determine the special education space, because there needs to be regular education space in a grade before there's special education space. So wherever there's a 0 for regular education space, there's automatically a 0 for special education space.
Is this what you wanted?
The other one.
Where I was.
Yes.
Recommendation?
No, I think there's a second.
Second page to that.
There's a second page
The
to that one.
recommendation.
I gotta go back. Yes. Give me a minute.
There's a second page, I think. Isn't there?
Can't you just hit next to the back?
No. Oh. No, it's the other chart, but the second page.
2 spaces.
There's 2 spaces in,
Intermediate?
there's also a couple of spaces in 4K.
There.
Yes, there it is. So it's a highly complicated chart because I have to do it by program, not just a grade level. So
Program meaning disability?
basically every special education teacher in a building, that's why PR1
Yeah.
is one special education teacher at Prairie, and we have 6 of them. And we have 5 at Heritage, and we have 4 at Arboretum, and 6 at Intermediate. So I have to do it by program, because that's what the state law requires me to do. So what I have here is the summary, where I'm saying we have 2 spaces at 4K, nothing at the elementary level, 2 at 5th grade. If you scroll down, nothing at the middle school, and 1 for a senior. And then on the very bottom, I also have to do it for occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech and language, hearing impaired, and visually impaired, and I don't have any space for those services either.
How many open enrollments do you get?
How many do we get a year in special ed? 1 or 2. It's not many.
They're comfortable generally in the programs that they're in.
Well, I should say 1 or 2 in the places where we have room.
Right.
We may get more, but they get automatically denied if they're applying for a grade that has 0. So we may have more applicants than the 1 or 2 that we accept. I just don't see those because Julie automatically denies those because there's no space in regular education.
And there's no indication of the severity of their disability either.
We do, part of the process is we do receive the records from the resident school district, which I then review. And because we may get a student who applies, let's say we'll get a 5th grader, one of the 5th graders. If that 5th grader has occupational therapy, physical therapy, and or speech and language therapy, that student will be denied because I don't have space in those areas. They would be accepted if they didn't have any of those related services. So it kind of depends on where we have space. So in general, because we don't have the related services available, and we haven't for the last few years, the severity of the students that we've received new open enrollments hasn't been as severe as maybe what happened years ago when we had more room in those related service areas.
Motion to approve special education open enrollment recommendations.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. Safety drill logs.
This
Motion
is,
to approve.
thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, announcements.
It's 10 to 10.
I don't think I have it.
But I think we should go back to the board development was a few handouts on our do's and don'ts for the referendum. I really think everybody needs to read
Yep.
that and be aware of how we want to conduct ourselves as we discuss that. So just please read that.
I guess the only other thing I would say is that there are things from a communication standpoint that we can do, but I think there's also a team working on a strategy for laying out all the information. So that'll be a piece that we'll bring back as well, so you understand exactly how we're outlaying some of the information that's going to be kind of coming forward.
Okay. So moving on to consent agenda, take them all or pull them out?
I recommend we pull the staff piece instead of vote on it separately.
Which part?
Staff change.
I have to remove myself from that one.
Oh, that's right, the staff changes. Okay, pulling that out. Anything else?
I recommend we pull the track request.
To Mankato?
Mankato.
And I would also like to pull out the orchestra, or the orchestra trip, and do it separately.
To Scotland? Okay, so we have the staff changes, the Mankato trip for track, and the orchestra. Anything else that you want to pull out? Okay, so a motion for everything else.
I move we approve the rest.
Second.
Any discussion on any of the other items?
Can I just ask one question? I saw under the 5,000 that we made our payment on the, doing the remediation for the prairie on the water
Yes,
issue.
yes.
Has there been any tracking of that water issue since it was completed?
It can't be.
Or not?
It's winter. It's frozen.
They're pumping water on the other side of Berlin right now. So are we still pumping water on the west side?
Residents are?
On the west, on the east side of Berlin, on the east side of Madison Street, they are still pumping water out of those units on Berlin.
So is your question like, what are we seeing
What are
happening?
we seeing happening? Because I don't want to come 6 months from now and they say, oh, here we are again. I think we need to somehow at least be doing our own monitoring to just say, is there still water coming out?
Right.
Before we're trying to just figure out if there was or not.
Okay. I don't know, I'll find it out.
Okay.
And I just want to say real quickly, again, there's just a ton that goes through those financial reports. I do try to look through them, and I am not comfortable with how quickly we pass this all the time without talking about them.
If there's something to talk about.
There was a whole chart that was in the extras that I don't want to take the time now to do it, and I'll talk to you about it later.
All right, that's good.
Okay, so we have a motion for everything except the 3 items that we initially mentioned. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. So let's pull them out one by one, starting with the orchestra trip to Scotland.
I would really, if we're going to vote on one, I think we should vote on the 2 of them at the same time.
The Mankato.
I wanted to pull it because I thought there might be some reaction to the track thing. And once again, if we're going to, I think we need to treat field trip requests with equity. And if we're going to approve a non-athletic co-curricular, I think we need to approve the athletic for the unusualness of opportunities. So I just want to make sure as a board we're looking at them with equity, not that they're 2 different things with different considerations.
Yeah, they kind of are. One is as a summer and one is during a school time. One is paid for by the people who attend, one is paid
By
at
the
more
boosters.
school and booster cost. They really are so different. And I get it, but you know, that
And
Scotland
yet
trip is
we
so
can pick,
much.
you know,
Yeah, we can go through,
the criticism we get on the athletic ones are the distances. Can't we find something closer? Well, I would argue,
And
can't
the-
we find a field trip closer than Scotland?
You
That
don't
has
have a
an
choice
equal
not
amount-
to go to a track meet the team is going to. You don't have a choice not to go.
You nominally have a choice not to go.
Yeah,
They say, oh, you don't have to, but.
Well, I
you're
think
right.
the challenge that I've got is you know, if you're looking for high-level competition, this area is high-level competition for track and field. Chicago, Illinois is probably a better location if you're looking for high-level competition. If you look at the times, you know, they're not superior to what we're doing here. You know, there's different opportunities. You got the United States Track and Field Federation that has meets. You've got Nike that has meets that these kids can go to. And you know, what is the purpose of our sports program? You know, if it is to get them to a meet that has coaches that are looking at them, that are recruiting, I'm not sure Mankato is the place to go.
I don't know why this one was chosen. It's I mean, you can see the definition as far as what was the rationale, and it's competing with the other teams that are being invited into that meet is kind of what the rationale is to go to in Minnesota.
So, I guess I have a couple of points, and thank you, Jack, for pointing out, because I had the same concerns. The one for the orchestra trip seemed like it was a request to allow the plan, it's not the approval of the actual
That's
trip.
correct. So the big trips, like the orchestra trip that's being proposed, they have a two-step process. One is an approval to go ahead and plan, see what their level of interest is, and then once they have that level of interest, the specific itinerary, the specific cost, then that comes back for final approval. We've had situations, there was one we approved to China a few years ago that never ran because it never got beyond the planning part. I would anticipate this one, given that they went to Ireland here in the last couple of years, and there was a large contingent of kids that went. My guess is that this one would find interest from families and parents.
But have we ever, once they have been approved for the plan and they go through that process and they come back, have we ever said that they couldn't go then?
No.
No, so if we're approving that they plan and go.
Right. So the other piece, just talking about track, I mean, under our current policy right now, they are allowed, it has to come here for approval, and that's a purview of the board to approve or not approve, but to adjacent states.
Yeah, I appreciate talking about the equity of doing this too, but I mean, I guess when reviewing the rationale for request, I did look at it the same way as Jack and think like this is pretty thin. You're going on a 4.5-hour bus ride to do a track event. I ran track and field. You don't pay attention to the other teams. It's an individual sport. I mean, the justification was to see different teams. You don't care about who you're running against in these events. So I thought it was kind of absurd to suggest to travel 4.5 hours for a track event. There's anywhere you can go that's closer than this. And if there was something special about this, I could see it. It just didn't strike me as it was.
Yes, Brian.
Does the whole team intend to go?
No, the whole team can't go.
Oh.
It's based on only
Certain athletes are being
and
invited.
events that have qualified, if they don't qualify. This will be an event better than any event within hours of here. And that was what the point is. The other point is you've got a number of athletes that have, or events that have placed in the top 2 or 3 in the state in return, and they're looking to get an early indication of where they are for both motivation and also, yes, there is an aspect of it that they're going to be in an elite level meet and there'll be more coaches there paying attention.
And it's like going to state before going to state, in a way.
It's an early yeah, it's an early, very high-level competition. Not every kid will get to go.
I get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who's running this?
That's a great question. I didn't ask.
Oh,
I didn't ask the coach that I was having a conversation with.
I just wonder why this is an elite one. I'm like, who's, somebody's running it.
Yeah, I honestly don't know that. I don't.
That helps to have
That
that
helps
perspective.
us.
That helps
You
a
know,
ton.
I was gonna suggest we go back and we find out some more rationale why this was picked, but that helps.
Yeah.
But I think if you're thinking of approving this one, the question becomes the bus and the school registration fee, which the registration fee does not seem unreasonable. Maybe the compromise is to say they offered, the booster said that they pitch in about the entry fee of the bus and just say, because of your distance of travel, if you want to do it, let the boosters pay for the bus.
We could offer to pay within our limit and then the booster pay the rest.
Pay the rest.
Whatever the rest of the rate
That's
would be.
right,
would be on
our
them.
circle.
But who are the boosters? You know, it comes right back to, we continue to tap this community for these events.
Oh, I think this is being driven by parents that would like their kids to go.
Yeah. I don't think they're
That-
running to
that would be
interest
my guess.
manufacturing to give money for the
No, yeah.
6 kids to go to
Yeah,
a track.
they're not going up and down the streets raising money for that.
And how much fundraising is going to go in the other one? I mean, there is going to be fundraising for that trip too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're looking at the $400 per school, plus you're gonna either have a bus or the vans. So the van would be driven by the coach, most likely. There's a different cost perspective there. And this isn't out of line with what it's part of how track works, is there is an entry event for many other things in the transportation.
So how many kids are likely to go on that? It doesn't say that either.
Doesn't say, but if they're looking
Well,
at
it says two school vans.
they're
We're not
looking at
talking
two
about
vans.
Oh.
A dozen.
Or
A
less.
dozen tops, probably.
Yeah.
It's a handful of kids if you're looking at the vans.
Okay.
Because you're basically looking at minivans.
Okay.
Okay, anybody want to make a motion on anything?
I move we support the request for the track meet.
Second.
With the understanding that we would pay for the 200 miles with our buses, and then the booster would have to pay for the rest.
What?
Get them to the border.
Get into the
You checked the rest of it.
Well, the 200 miles, remember, that's on the policy that's not in place yet. Because that was the policy we
Okay.
wrote, and we said that
Haven't
we would,
implemented yet.
and that hasn't been, we need to bring it back for some final wording. But even when it
We can
would
still
be
use it as a
approved,
guideline, though.
we could use it as a guideline, but we were saying we weren't going to implement that till the fall. So
Okay.
that was,
And
But this
our
is-
current policy is adjacent state, isn't it?
current policies adjacent state.
And Minnesota is
Adjacent
pretty
state.
adjacent.
And
You can
Cato's
still-
297 miles, so if we cover the first 200,
That's your recommendation. So
that's
your
my,
recommendation,
that is my motion.
your motion is to approve it and that the district would pay the cost of the busing transportation for the first 200 miles. And then
Yes.
the Booster Club picks up anything that's addition to that.
If they go with a coach, then Booster Club picks up the coach.
Are we picking up the registration fee? Is that
Well,
assumed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or participating.
Okay, so we have a motion. Did somebody, and Judy seconded.
I didn't second that, I think it's picky. I'm not
I'll second it.
And you second it.
Save a second.
I don't think it's as bad.
Okay, any other discussion on the Mankato trip? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
2. 5-2, so it passes. Okay, can we go back to the orchestra trip? Or a motion or discussion?
This is the
Orchestra.
I move
motion.
we approve the planning of the orchestra trip to Scotland.
Second.
Discussion. None? Okay.
We don't have anything like it now, but is there any mechanism for ensuring that some of the kids who can't just drop $3,000 on this get to go to these kind of things?
They do. They do help with that.
There is that financial assistant group, and we have really been raising money, and we've been reaching out to kids
And they've always done that.
helping
They've always
Does
many
that
kids.
hold true too for the DC trip or not?
Yes, for the middle school DC
Yes.
trip, yep. We
Okay, thank you.
financed kids there. Yep, that's
Yes.
a pretty viable group.
I thought that was the answer, but I wanted to say.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Clarification.
So any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I said aye.
7-0, okay, nice.
And then we've got to go back to.
Then we have to go back to the
changes.
staff changes for January.
Did we do Washington?
No, that's all included with the other
Nobody
consent
pulled it.
Nobody
agenda.
pulled it.
Quiet, Judy.
It's too late.
You can go to Scotland, but not Washington.
That ship has sailed.
That bus is on its
That
way.
bus is loaded.
Okay, so we need a motion for staff changes.
I move we approve the staff changes as recommended.
Any other discussion on staff changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Abstain.
And then one abstain. Board business, legislative update, convention, we kind of talked about.
Convention, we'll get the itinerary out
This week.
tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
We're working on some of those things, and a few things didn't work as we intended. So we'll send that out to everybody who's attending, so you know what's going on.
And the girl car is leaving Tuesday.
All right.
Jack, you can come with us, but we're going on Tuesday.
This is the JF, so you can come with us.
All right.
Okay,
One trip to the next meetings.
meetings.
All right.
We got a little bit left.
All right, I'm gonna try to put as many of these, Brian, we do need an HR meeting, is that right?
Yes,
So why don't you come forward here? I do want to put a budget committee together. If we can start to look at that first week in February.
I'm gone until the 10th. So sorry about that.
Oh, that's all right.
When do you leave?
January 30th.
All right.
But you could call in a sub. That's been done before.
Yeah, and I'm happy to sub if you want to have it in February.
Let's do that. I'm gonna need to get my head around
That's
what
all
we're
right.
doing.
Are
So if that's
you
okay.
a club or an Italian?
Yes.
So,
So, all right.
It's getting really late. We gotta get out of
Is that
here.
on film?
So,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If this were
All right.
really pertinent, this is where they start talking about solvers.
Okay,
they're closed.
budget.
So on the 3rd, we have facilities already, right? At 4 PM?
Do we?
We do.
I got it.
I
That
don't
would be
know
a
my
great.
calendar.
Brian, I got a question. What's teacher HR committee at 4 on the 3rd? It's a big question mark. I don't know if that's actually happening or
Yep, we're happening 4 to 5.
You're happening.
if it's 4 to
Yeah.
5.
And you have facilities on the 3rd too?
That would be, I need to have a facilities meeting, so if you've got that on the 3rd, I'm happy to do it on
That's at 4 o'clock.
February 3rd?
4 o'clock, and I would have to move it.
I mean, my group is a dozen people, we could go to the back.
All right, well, we can go back there too. So we could do facilities at 4,
Yeah, and how long do you need for that?
probably an hour and a half.
Do you want to do the budget right after that?
Sure.
5:30?
Yeah, that'd be great.
I don't think I can make the 3rd work.
Okay, so let's look at
Okay,
it.
so budget on the 3rd at 5:30?
Well, hang on.
Just hang on.
You just blew up the facilities meeting,
All right.
even though we scheduled this before.
Budget.
We could still do facilities.
What time is facilities supposed to be?
It was supposed to be 4, you can move budget to 4.
Could you make a later facility?
If you could do it half an hour earlier, I could do it.
Half an hour earlier, at 3:30 on February 3rd.
Okay.
So later doesn't help you.
Does
I just
another-
have to be gone by 5 that day.
Okay.
does another-
And I can't sub then because I'm in Fort Worth meeting
All right,
that.
well, what about the 4th?
The 4th is open on my
If it's-
calendar.
What about the 4th?
The
I
4th,
can't be here till 4:45.
I can do the 4th.
5 o'clock?
So that would be the budget meeting at 5 o'clock.
So if we did the budget at 5 and then we did,
Fine.
I'm not even sure what I'm doing there yet, so
Oh, we
let's
gotta
just say
move
5 to
facilities,
6, and
though.
let's do, what if we did facilities at 6 on the 4th?
Is
Or
an
what
hour
if
gonna be
you,
good enough?
or what if you did facilities on the 4th at 4?
And then do budget at 5:30.
Yeah.
Just,
Yep, does that work?
Sure.
5:30
So,
budget, and
facilities.
I'm going to sub for Julie.
So
Yeah.
Jack, does that
That
work
would
for
be
you?
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joan.
Okay.
Make it work for you, Randy.
So 4 o'clock is facilities? And then we could
4
do,
at 4.
and then we would do 5:30 as budget on the 4th.
Whoops.
All right, Brian, HR,
Um,
which is, who we got here? Julie, Jack, and Joan.
Yeah.
Do you want to go,
You guys are taking
when are you leaving,
I don't
Julie?
have it.
January 30th.
Send me meeting notes.
I don't know
Jen,
when you're
what
going to be
was-
ready to go with that,
What
Brian.
was that?
We could, yeah, I could be ready prior to that. I mean, it's a lot of, it's first vetting of some ideas and just giving me some directions with what they want me to cost out, so.
29th could work. I'm very booked on the 27th, but the 29th is still.
What about the 29th, Brian? Does that work?
Or the 28th.
If you want to do, the 28th would be my preference, if we
All right,
could go
go
like
for it.
4 PM, is it?
That's HR?
Yeah.
4
That's me?
o'clock,
No, I can't make it.
128.
Oh, you
Oh,
can't
you
do it.
can't make it?
I can't make it then. I'm booked for traveling.
That whole week,
that-
or-
that whole
That
week.
week, or
Okay.
that day?
And then you're gone till the, all right. Convention.
So
We'll
we'd have to
sub
do
for
it-
Jack.
Yeah.
So
Oh, it's up for Jack.
Jack, do you mind if we
What
pull
day?
some?
The 28th,
28th.
Of what?
January.
January.
We can't make
What time?
4 o'clock.
Yeah, I couldn't be there till 4:45.
I could do it, if you're just looking for someone to do it. That's 28th at 4 o'clock.
Yeah,
If-
I mean, or 4:45,
You're okay.
I mean, it, 4:45 would be fine.
Or I'm pushing it
We can
into
talk
a
about
date
it for a
when
second.
Julie can't be there when she's gone in February.
Oh, you are?
No, I said,
No, we're trying not to.
otherwise
Oh.
I'm trying not to, so,
Okay.
so you didn't miss everything here.
For,
HR.
I'd
So
like
what
to-
was our date that works?
I'd like to be in HR.
Okay.
But he
But
doesn't
I
want us
can't.
to
All right,
meet
so
without-
what about the week of,
I'm coming back just
So
in time. for
we
the-
have, well, we have a board meeting on the 10th
yeah,
that night, I mean, so.
do we have
You wanna
action, do
before
we have
that.
action stuff that will come out of there, or things that will come to the board meeting?
um,
Yes.
No, we would have to.
meet before the board meeting, 4 o'clock,
So-
4:30
I'm flying in. I'm supposed to get in at 3.
on the 10th.
Yes. So in theory, that can work?
3 to 4 o'clock would be tough to get out
That
of
would be
here.
very tough. You guys can do it in January.
4:30.
You guys can do it in January.
So, 20, I mean,
Back to
28th is when
Back to
Jack.
Oh, I'd be happy to
January
sub for you
28th.
that day too, if you're
Yeah.
okay with that. Either way.
We would just like a date before the
Or if you do,
meeting.
yeah.
I don't
Should we
think-
look at the 10th before the board meeting, and if you get delayed, Mark will sub?
Oh, or do you even want to mess with is what I wanted with traveling, because you're going to have to be ready for the board meeting too.
I'm just trying to get along.
Yeah,
I'm not waiting out on everything before I
yeah.
wing out for good.
So, I'd be happy to just cover it, if that's what you want to do.
Okay.
You just come to the meeting, if she's there, she's there.
So-
If she's
Yeah.
not, you're.
Does that work, Brian? That it'd be right before the meeting?
Yeah.
So HR, what time?
4 PM on
We're
the
going to go
10th.
2:10 at 4 o'clock, or,
Do you, I mean, if we, I mean, we
4:30?
could push it to 4:30 and that
Yeah.
gives us a comfortable amount of time before.
let's
Sure, that'd be
do
better.
4:30, and then,
Sure, that'd be awesome.
All right.
do we have curriculum set up this month?
We need to make sure it's,
Curriculum on the
Rebecca
27th.
has it, but it's at 3:30.
It's at 3:30 on the-
Immediate leading into.
On Monday, the
Oh,
27th.
and I even have that on my.
Do we have a location?
Is it the intermediate school?
It's at the
because it's
intermediate,
leading
because we're
into
doing all that
Saturday.
other stuff there anyway.
Right. So do you have curriculum already scheduled too?
Yes,
All
3:30.
right, thank you.
On January 27th, right?
Yes.
3:30, and then it's followed by
The special meeting.
special meeting at 5:30.
All right.
With the curriculum presentations.
Oh, the curriculum presentation's at 5:30.
Yes.
No, that's at 4:30.
No, it's at 4:30.
So it's a one
No,
hour
it's at
hard
4:30.
stop.
4:30.
The presentations are at 4:30.
Yes.
Our little meeting is at 3:30.
Yeah, 1
There's
hour
there's a
hard
special meeting that for the whole board.
Whole
at
board.
4:30.
The full board is meeting at 4:30.
All right, policy, Mike, to move forward what we've just done. We probably need an hour for that. So policy, we have Mike, Judy, and Mark.
When do you want to do it?
First week in February.
Yep.
Any of those days work better?
Wednesday would be ideal. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, Wednesday would be ideal.
Wednesday after, I'm not able to do that one.
Okay, no, Wednesday would be good.
So,
Monday works, Tuesday, Thursday have to be after 4:45,
so we did,
or start without me.
can we do 5 o'clock on like the 6th?
Sure.
Does that work, Mike?
How about the 6th?
Yeah, if that works for Mike.
Yeah.
I will see 5 p.m.
Let's wait on that whole
Okay,
meeting.
thank you.
We have too much.
We have 5.
We have no days left.
That's all I have.
Okay, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Didn't Dave say it first?
Dave said it.
Jack
Jack
seconded.
seconded. Mike seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Brian, are we off the air?